Chapter 10:17. Originally, Ji Tianqing's attention was only on the star mineral vein, and he was excited and surprised. He never thought that the star mineral vein would have any connection with the boundless stone. However, when he heard the Golden Mountain King's reminder, his body shook, and he showed an expression of realization. No wonder this black crystal stone is so strange. Its energy waves are mysterious and obscure. It's completely different from the star mineral vein. He sped up and touched the black crystal stone. Soon, he reached the side of the black crystal stone. He stood in the middle of a cluster of silver star ores and stared at the black crystal in the middle of the cluster of rocks. After a moment of careful observation, he finally showed an excited expression. That's right. This is it. This is the boundless stone I've been looking for. I didn't expect it to be hiding on this mysterious island, 5,000 meters underground. If we hadn't landed on this island and been attacked by the red flame pterosaurs, we wouldn't have come so deep underground, and we wouldn't have been able to find it. After spending so many months and going through so many dangers and twists, it wasn't in vain. It was all worth it. Ji Tianqing secretly clenched his fists, murmuring excitedly. His mood was a little complicated, and he secretly sighed at the wonders of fate. The Golden Mountain King was also happy and excited for him. He nodded excitedly and said, "Yes, the heavens still care for young Master Ji. This is your destiny." Ji Tianqing squatted down, slowly reaching out to touch the diamond-shaped boundless stone. He murmured doubtfully, "On the surface, this looks like an ordinary black crystal stone. But why is it called the boundless stone? Why is there no strong spiritual energy waves, but a very obscure and mysterious aura?" The Golden Mountain King also frowned doubtfully, shaking his head. He couldn't answer this question. Then, Ji Tianqing's hand touched the boundless stone. He immediately felt as if he had touched a piece of 10,000-year-old ice. An unparalleled bone-chilling coldness flowed into his body through his palm, along his arm, into his mind, and then into his soul. At that moment, he only felt that his entire palm, right arm, and even half of his body were sealed by ice. He lost consciousness like a stone statue, as if half of his body no longer belonged to him. Even his soul seemed to have been sealed and imprisoned. It was as if he was dead. He didn't have any feelings or thoughts. Fortunately, the heaven-mending orb had fused with his soul and was sleeping peacefully in his mind. When the mysterious power of the boundless stone was about to seal his soul, the heaven-mending pearl lit up with a sacred white light, emitting a gentle and warm power. Shwa! That sacred white light filled his mind, saving his soul and half of his body, dispelling the mysterious power of the boundless stone, allowing him to regain his senses and consciousness. Phew! Ji Tianqing hurriedly retracted his right hand and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air as if relieved of a heavy burden. His face was full of shock. That feeling just now made him feel as if he had walked through the gates of hell, as if he had experienced death. Jin Shan King noticed the change in Ji Yunshu's expression and hurriedly asked with concern, "Young Master Ji, what's wrong? Are you all right?" Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment before he calmed down. With a serious expression he said, "What a terrifying power! No wonder it's called the boundless stone that can be used to forge divine weapons. It's too terrifying." Jin Shan King was puzzled and asked in confusion, "Young Master, what's going on?" Ji Tianqing gazed at the boundless stone and told him what he had experienced and felt just now. After listening, Jin Shan King was also shocked and felt that it was inconceivable. It's just a piece of ore, how could it have such terrifying power and effect? I have lived for hundreds of years, and I believe that I know all kinds of ores in the earth like the back of my hand. However, I have never heard of such a magical and powerful ore. If this ore is used to forge a weapon, wouldn't it be able to seal the soul and kill the enemy's soul in a second? Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. With a serious expression he nodded and said, "That's right. Therefore, I want to use this boundless stone to repair the broken divine sword. As long as the broken sword is repaired, it will have the terrifying power of the boundless stone, and the power of the broken sword will increase exponentially." Jin Shan King thought for a moment and said worriedly, "Young Master, this boundless stone is indeed powerful, but its power is so mysterious and terrifying. Who can smelt it and use it to repair the divine sword? Even if I am a grandmaster craftsman, I dare not touch this boundless stone." Ji Tianqing was also worried and hesitant. He nodded and said, "That's right, this is indeed a difficult problem. However, let's not think too much about it. Let's dig out this boundless stone first. As for how to smelt it and use it to repair the broken sword, we'll think of a way later." After saying that, he took out the broken sword and was about to dig out the boundless stone from the star or vein. The Jinshan king quickly stopped him and said with a solemn expression, "Young master, it's better to let me do the mining for you." Ji Tianqing knew that he was a top grandmaster in this field, so he nodded and agreed. Jinshan king stared at the boundless stone and observed it for a while. Then he held the dark golden warhammer with both of his hands and operated the secret art with all of his power. He didn't dig out the boundless stone directly. Instead, he used the warhammer to break the star or vein around the boundless stone. He took out a piece of or as big as a water tank from the star or vein, leaving a huge black hole in the star or vein. The huge or covered the boundless stone. Jinshan king had to break all the star or vein before he could take out the boundless stone. However, when he just picked up the ore and was about to break the edge of the ore, something strange happened. From the black hole in the star or vein, dark red bloodlight gushed out like fire. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Over 20 balls of dark red bloodlight rushed out from the black hole and screeched as they flew towards Ji Tianqing and Jinshan king. At this moment, the two of them finally saw it clearly. They were over 20 strange red birds. The strange birds looked like crows and three-legged birds. They looked very strange. They must be ancient species. Each of the bloodbirds was around Sky Origin Stage LV9, very close to the Soul Tempering Stage. They were as fast as lightning and emitted extremely dense bloodlight. They had the power to confuse the soul. Ji Tianqing and Jinshan king were dizzy and confused. Bang, bang, bang. Amidst a series of muffled sounds, the two who were caught off guard were sent flying by a flock of bloodbirds. They fell miserably into the star vein. However, the sudden turn of events left the two of them a little confused. However, the two of them immediately reacted and used their secret techniques to attack the flock of bloodbirds. Swish! Swish! Ji Tianqing released golden swordlight that covered the sky and ground. He cut over 10 bloodbirds into pieces and scattered them in the star or vein. Jinshan king also swung his warhammer and used the white light of his divine soul to kill over 10 bloodbirds. The group of bloodbirds was finally killed. The star or vein quieted down. Ji Tianqing picked up the stone that was as big as a water tank and placed it into his interspatial ring. Then, he brought Jinshan king back to the black hole and observed it carefully. Below the water tank-sized black hole, white light was faintly surging, forming a vortex. The white light vortex emitted the power of space. It was like a portal that led to an unknown place. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and Jinshan king looked at each other with surprise and anticipation. I didn't expect there to be a portal under the boundless stone. I wonder where this portal leads to? Young master, according to my experience, this kind of space vortex hidden deep underground is very likely to be the entrance to a secret realm. Entrance to a mystery realm? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said seriously, other than a mystery realm, it could also be an alternate space. Chapter 10:18. Ji Tianqing and Jinshan king both understood that opportunities often came with dangers. Just like just now, they were besieged by a few flaming pterosaurs not long after they landed on the island. They were severely injured and had to escape to the depths of the earth to hide. That was how they found the boundless stone by chance. Now, the space vortex in front of them could be the door to the treasure or the passage to the forbidden land of death. Both of them frowned, silently pondering and weighing the pros and cons. After a while, both of them had an answer in their hearts. They looked up at each other. Jinshan king said solemnly, Young Master Ji, whether it is the star mineral vein or the boundless stone, they are both rare treasures. I believe that the space vortex hidden in the star mineral vein must be extraordinary and mysterious as well. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It will be a pity if we don't go in and take a look. We will regret it in the future. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, That's right. This is such a great opportunity and adventure. Ordinary people can't even dream of it. How can we miss it? No matter whether the passage is a treasure or a forbidden land, whether it is a blessing or a disaster, we have to go in and take a look to know the result. Both of them reached a consensus and prepared to enter the space vortex to explore. Of course, before that, both of them took elixirs to heal their injuries and recover to their peak condition. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. Both of them relied on their strong physiques and self-healing abilities to recover from their injuries and skills. After they were ready, Ji Tianqing held the broken sword and stepped into the space vortex formed by the white light. Swoosh! The white light flashed and swallowed his body. Clearly, he had passed through the spatial tunnel and entered another space. Jin Shan King held his warhammer tightly and stepped forward cautiously. He was about to step into the space vortex. However, the space vortex formed by the white light suddenly disappeared. It disappeared. How could this be? Gold Mountain King was dumbfounded. He stared at the black hole, his eyes filled with shock and worry. How could the space vortex suddenly disappear? Could it be that only one person is allowed to enter the passage? Or perhaps, only humans were allowed to enter that place? It's over. Young Master Ji went in alone. If he encountered any danger, who would protect him? No, I have to think of a way to get in touch with young Master Ji. Otherwise, he'll definitely think that I'm a coward who doesn't dare to enter with him. The Golden Mountain King was anxious and worried. He walked around the black hole a few times with his warhammer, but he could not think of a way. The sudden disappearance of the spatial vortex completely disrupted his plan, leaving him helpless. After racking his brains for a long time, he still couldn't come up with a solution. He could only squat beside the black hole and wait patiently for Ji Tianqing to come out. He silently prayed in his heart, "Young Master Ji, oh young Master Ji, I hope that you will be blessed by the heavens. Please don't let anything bad happen to you." After saying that, he looked at the rock layer not far away. Fortunately, the 4 red flame pterosaurs guarding the rock layer were still quietly lurking underground and had no intention of attacking. The Jin Shan King was slightly relieved. He raised his spirits and looked at the black hole with anticipation, waiting for Ji Tianqing to return. Swoosh! With a flash of brilliance, Ji Tianqing clearly felt that he had passed through a mysterious and vast spatial tunnel and entered an alternate space. When the white light in front of him dissipated, his feet finally landed on solid ground. He looked around vigilantly. He held the broken sword in his hand and covered himself with a layer of true energy shield to guard against any possible danger. However, when he looked around, he immediately let down his guard. This was an alternate dimension that was rich in spiritual qi of heaven and earth and was full of spirit. In other words, this was a paradise that was like a paradise. At this moment, he was standing at the foot of a 1,000 tall mountain. Under his feet was a green grassland with colorful flowers among the fragrant grass that was half a man's height. In front of him was the 1,000 tall mountain. The mountain was covered with towering ancient trees. It was a lush and verdant scene. Halfway up the mountain, there was a waterfall that was about 100 meters wide. It poured down from a height of 1,000 meters and fell into a deep pool at the foot of the mountain. At the top of the mountain, covered by white clouds and thick fog, a modeled ancient palace could be vaguely seen. Half of the palace's corner and cornice were exposed. The sky was clear for thousands of miles. The sky was blue as if it had just been washed, and a red sun hung high in the sky. Ji Tianqing did not know where he was or how vast this area was. However, he knew that this was definitely a cave abode where a powerhouse lived in seclusion. Fortunately, it was not a forbidden area where there was a high chance of survival, but a mysterious and ancient secret realm. With the broken sword in hand, he strode across the green grassland towards the tall mountain. At the foot of the mountain, there was a 5-foot-wide bluestone staircase. It followed the steep mountain up and connected to the palace at the top of the mountain. Originally, Ji Tianqing could fly into the sky and directly land on the mountain to see what was going on. However, it was his first time in this unfamiliar secret realm. Naturally, he could not do that. He could not see the whole picture of the mountain and might encounter danger. If there was a hidden powerhouse living in the ancient palace at the top of the mountain, his lack of manners would definitely offend him and cause unnecessary disputes. In a moment, he arrived at the foot of the mountain and was about to step onto the blue stone staircase. At this moment, he suddenly saw that on the ground beside the staircase, there was a gray-white stone tablet that was more than 10 feet tall. He took a closer look. On the gray-white stone tablet, there were 3 ancient and mysterious characters engraved on it. Beside the 3 big characters, there was a line of small characters. Ji Tianqing had read a lot of books, both ancient and modern. After carefully identifying it for a moment, he recognized that it was the incomparably ancient XINE ancient seal characters. The 3 big characters were Eastern Mountain residents. And the line of small characters beside it was a sentence. Cultivate one's body and mind, observe the heavens and read the world, lie drunk in the clouds and smile at the world. Ji Tianqing was suddenly filled with deep veneration. He thought to himself, Eastern Mountain Residence should be the name of this cave abode. He didn't know who the owner of the Eastern Mountain Residence was, to be able to say such bold and majestic words. It seems that the owner of Eastern Mountain Residence must be a peerless powerhouse living in seclusion. Otherwise, he would not have such an arrogant aura. He sighed in his heart and was about to withdraw his gaze. However, he suddenly realized that the gray-white stone tablet was actually made of precious psychic white jade. His body shook again, and his eyes were filled with shock. He exclaimed in disbelief, "The psychic white jade is a precious material for refining weapons. A piece the size of a fist can be sold for a high price of 100,000 spiritual stones. An entire piece of psychic white jade that is 10 feet tall is a rare treasure in the world. It can be called a priceless treasure." Chapter 10:19. The rare psychic white jade was actually treated as an ordinary stone tablet and placed in the grass at the foot of the mountain. Ji Tianqing could not imagine how divine the owner of the Eastern Mountain Residence, who treated this priceless treasure like a stubborn stone, was. His heart throbbed for no reason. He desperately wanted to climb to the top of the mountain and pay a visit to the owner of the Eastern Mountain Residence, if that hidden powerhouse was still alive. However, before he stepped on the limestone steps, he first uprooted the stone tablet and put it into his space ring. This huge and complete psychic white jade could be sold for at least 100 million spiritual stones when he returned to the Central Plains. How could he miss such a treasure? After keeping the jade tablet, Ji Tianqing stepped onto the limestone steps. However, just as his feet stepped onto the steps, he felt an invisible force brewing in the bluestone steps. He immediately stopped and sensed carefully. Then, he found a clue. Haha, the seemingly ordinary limestone steps are covered with mottled traces of vicissitudes. It's obvious that it's been through tens of thousands of years. I didn't expect that the limestone steps could still activate the power of a formation after tens of thousands of years. It's unbelievable. Tens of thousands of years, the transformations of the sea and mulberry fields could erase everything in the world. No matter if it was a peerless expert or a divine weapon that dazzled the world, they would all gradually wither and turn into ashes in the tens of thousands of years. Even a powerful formation was no exception. In the end, its power would be exhausted and it would gradually disappear. However, the limestone steps under Ji Tianqing's feet still activated the formation, and its power was vigorous. He had no choice but to walk carefully. His spiritual sense seeped into the limestone steps to check its mysteries. However, the formation was extraordinary. It was invisible and unfathomable. The 3,000 steps from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain had merged with the entire mountain as if it had a life of its own. Such a strange and mysterious thing shocked him, but it also made him more curious and expectant. Rustle, rustle, rustle! He moved his feet and took 3 steps in a row. Finally, the limestone steps under his feet changed. 4 of the limestone steps 3 steps in front of him disappeared into thin air, and an empty space appeared. Can't we climb the mountain without the bluestone steps? Ji Tianqing curled the corners of his mouth, holding a hint of a smile. He took a few steps forward and was about to step onto the ground where the steps were missing. The seemingly ordinary ground actually released invisible spiritual energy that condensed into a dozen or so sharp blades that shot towards him like a rain of arrows. At the critical moment, his expression changed. Without hesitation, he circulated his energy and soared into the sky, wanting to escape. However, a formless pressure also descended from the sky. It was as if a huge mountain was pressing down on his head, causing his feet to be unable to leave the ground, let alone fly. Damn it! It's so dangerous. This seemingly ordinary limestone staircase is actually a trap path filled with murderous intent. This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he quickly summoned the soul-reaping bell, enveloping himself. Pang pang pang! More than a dozen sharp blades condensed from spiritual energy slammed into the soul-reaping bell one after another, producing a dull, loud sound. The soul-reaping bell was actually struck until it trembled continuously, emitting a series of buzzing sounds that didn't disappear for a long time. If not for the protection of the soul-reaping bell, Ji Tianqing would have been seriously injured even if he didn't die. His expression instantly became solemn. His feet stopped on the limestone staircase, and he didn't dare to move anymore. This limestone staircase contains the mysteries of array formations and is filled with danger. The slightest carelessness will cost me my life. Since it's difficult to reach the peak, Then I'll retreat. He turned his head and looked behind him. The few steps he walked on previously had long disappeared. Say, looks like there's no way back after stepping on the limestone staircase. I can only continue forward. I have to study the array formation properly. How can I safely cross the limestone staircase and reach the peak? He stood on the limestone staircase, circulating his energy and spiritual consciousness to carefully observe the staircase in front of him, the mountain terrain and terrain on his left and right, and began to ponder hard. The foot of the mountain was silent. Time passed quietly. Very quickly. 4 hours passed. Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a long time. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed through his mind, and he revealed a relieved smile. I see, I understand now. The owner of this eastern mountain residence prided himself on his ability to observe the heavens and see the world. Clearly, he was a supreme expert that surpassed the soul refinement realm. He lived here in seclusion and casually set up an array formation that could merge the limestone staircase with heaven and earth, borrowing the power of heaven and earth to operate it. Even after tens of thousands of years, as long as this mountain is not destroyed, the array formation will not wither and dissipate. If I want to break the array formation, I have to borrow the power of heaven and earth to fight with force. He thought of a way to break the array formation and immediately began to act. He circulated his energy and activated the soul reaping bell to protect himself. He burst forth with all his strength and charged forward. Swoosh! The soul reaping bell protected him as he charged through the empty space and rushed forward as fast as the wind towards the limestone staircase. Dozens of sharp white blades of light shot out from the grayish-brown soil and attacked him from all directions. Bam! 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 In a series of muffled sounds, the soul-reaping bell trembled and let out a dull buzzing sound. Ji Tianqing finally crossed the empty space 10 steps away with great difficulty. When he landed on the limestone staircase, his face was already pale and blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. The soul-reaping bell's power was almost exhausted. It was dim and no longer had any power. Fortunately, he successfully charged through the empty space and landed on the limestone staircase. He could successfully begin to break the array formation. Advance 4 steps, retreat 2 steps, advance 3 steps, retreat 1 step, he muttered in a low voice. He took 4 steps in a row and then retreated 2 steps. The limestone staircase was indeed safe and did not release any powerful attacks. He silently chanted the formula to break the array and borrowed the power of heaven and earth to offset the power of the array formation on the limestone staircase. He continued to climb up. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. He advanced and retreated thousands of steps. Finally, he crossed more than 1,000 steps and arrived at the waist of the mountain. During this process, he was safe and sound. The more than 1,000 limestone staircase disappeared one after another. However, when he reached the waist of the mountain, he could sense that the power of the array formation on the limestone staircase had changed. Correspondingly, his method of breaking the array formation had to change. Moreover, if he took a wrong step, he would be counterattacked by the array formation, which would be more powerful and dangerous. However, with his previous experience, Ji Tianqing was confident and found a trick to breaking the array formation. He stood on the stone staircase at the waist of the mountain and carefully observed and pondered for 2 hours before he found a way to break the array formation. 4 hours later, he finally crossed more than 1,000 steps and reached the peak of the mountain from the waist of the mountain. When his feet left the limestone staircase and successfully reached the peak of the mountain, he relaxed and let out a long sigh of relief. He rested for a moment before stepping onto the square at the peak of the mountain. Chapter 10:20. That ancient-looking palace had obviously been there for tens of thousands of years. The walls and stone surface were mottled and peeled off, and there were huge cracks. The octagonal cornice of the palace was originally exquisite and beautiful, but now it was broken, and even a few corners of the cornice were broken. Ji Tianqing probed with his spiritual consciousness and found that there was still a large array protecting the palace. Although the power of that array had been weakened to the extreme, it was still a spirit soul. However, it was a primordial soul-level formation after all. Even if it only had 10% of its power left, it was still not something that he could easily break. The gate of the palace was tightly shut, and an invisible array formation shield enveloped the entire palace. The huge square was paved with precious celestial spirit jade, and it happened to be square, like a huge chessboard. On the ground of the square, dark golden bricks were laid out in crisscrossing lines. This square with a radius of 200 meters was indeed a huge chessboard. There were more than a dozen chess pieces on the chessboard, and there were more than a dozen stone sculptures that were taller than a person. Some were carved as lions, some as tigers, and some as cheetahs, giant elephants, and flying eagles. Although each stone sculpture was lifelike, and the carvings of the beasts looked very lifelike. However, these stone sculptures had been there for too long, and they were mottled and full of cracks. There were also 2 piles of gray stone fragments on the east and west sides of the square. Ji Tianqing observed for a moment and found that they were broken pieces of many stone sculptures of beasts, and they were crushed by someone. It seems that the owner of the Eastern Mountain residence used the square as a chessboard and played chess here. He was playing the beast chess of the ancient times, and I have seen it in ancient books before. It was a kind of chess that was fierce and murderous, and it contained the Tao of heaven and earth, and the truth of martial arts. Until now, the ancient beast chess had been lost for many years, and there were very few people who still knew about it. I wonder who the owner of the Eastern Mountain residence was playing with? What was the final outcome? Ji Tianqing stood in the square, staring at the remaining dozen chess pieces on the chessboard, and couldn't understand it after observing for a long time. Helpless, he could only put down the beast chess for now and cross the square to the palace gate. The ancient bronze door had long been rusted. Even the door knocker and the carvings of the mythical beasts on the door had been corroded and damaged. He stood in front of the door and opened his pure heart Dharma eye. He used his spiritual sense to carefully observe the array and ponder how to break it. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Ji Tianqing was immersed in the wonders of the primordial spirit grade array formation, racking his brains to think of a way to break it, and actually forgot about the passage of time. Very quickly, 5 days passed. It wasn't until the morning of the 6th day that he finally woke up as if from a dream and closed his eyes. Then, when he opened his eyes again, his eyes were clear and firm, surging with a trace of joy. He slowly stretched out his hands, and golden light surged in his palms. He waved his palms and shot out arcs of light, which condensed into mysterious patterns and poured them into the bronze gate. After repeating this over 100 times, he was exhausted, and half of his power had been consumed. Only then did the bronze door light up with a dim golden light. After shaking a few times, it slowly opened to both sides. Great! After 10,000 years, the Essence Soul Grade Grand Formation has weakened to such an extent, yet I was actually able to break it with my own hands. It's truly inconceivable. His heart was filled with excitement, and he was proud of his attainments in array formations. After the bronze door opened, he couldn't wait to step through the door and enter the palace to see what was inside. Behind the door was a vast courtyard. Originally, the courtyard should have been clean, the stone path wide, and there should have been rare spirit trees, spirit flowers, and rare herbs in the garden. However, the courtyard was now filled with dust, which had condensed into hard soil. There was only soil and floating ash left in the garden. The spirit trees and rare herbs had long turned into ashes and melted into the soil. Ji Tianqing walked through the courtyard, and as he walked towards the main hall, he pondered, this Eastern Mountain residence should be the cave residence of a certain powerhouse from 10,000 years ago. Now that 10,000 years have passed, even if that hidden powerhouse had the strength of a god, he should have already passed away. I only hope that this peerless powerhouse left behind some secret inheritance or rare treasures in his cave residence. Only then will my risky trip here not be in vain. After a while, he reached the entrance of the main hall and reached out to push open the heavy door. What was slightly embarrassing was that the door made of refined star iron was too heavy. When he pushed the door, he used too much strength and directly pushed the 2 doors to the ground, crashing into the main hall with a loud boom. The entire door frame had been destroyed. The 2 doors of refined star iron weighing 50,000 pounds had crushed 2 large holes in the floor of the main hall, and dense cracks had appeared. Refined star iron. It's also a precious material for refining soul-grade magic treasures. The owner of Eastern Mountain residence actually used it as a door. What a waste! Ji Tianqing sighed in his heart. With a thrifty attitude, he lifted the 2 doors and put them into his spatial ring. Then, he carefully observed the dimly lit main hall. The spacious main hall was decorated very simply. Other than the 6 vermilion pillars that supported the dome, there were only a few stone sculptures in the main hall, and a few murals of mountains and rivers on the walls. Other than that, there wasn't even a throne in the main hall. There was only a praying mat made of heavenly fire spirit jade placed on the seat of honor in the main hall, covered by a thick layer of dust. Ji Tianqing waved his hand to sweep away the thick layer of dust. Only then did the praying mat reappear in the light of day, shining with a crimson brilliance and emitting a turbulent and violent energy. Without a doubt, this priceless praying mat had also become his. He walked around the main hall and didn't find any valuable treasures. Then, he left the main hall through a side door and entered a study. This study was very spacious and bright. The decorations were simple and elegant, and the mood was lofty. Of course, after 10,000 years, no matter how elegant the study was, after being covered by a thick layer of dust, it became dull and ordinary. Moreover, the ground and walls had cracked and peeled. A few stone bookshelves were also broken. Many books that were neatly arranged on the bookshelves had long been corroded into ashes. The ground was littered with gravel, covered with ashes and weathered pages. When the wind blew, they turned into dust. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing sighed inwardly. Sigh. I originally wanted to find some clues in this study to understand the owner of Eastern Mountain Residence. I didn't expect the study to be so corroded. No matter what book it is, after 10,000 years, it will turn into dust. He shook his head in disappointment and was about to turn and leave. However, from the corner of his eye, he saw a dark golden box buried in a pile of gravel in the corner. He picked up the metal box that looked like a small treasure chest. After opening it, he saw a black ancient book inside. The ancient book was not made of paper, but of a special metal that was as cold as ice. On the cover of the black ancient book were 5 ancient, dark golden characters. Chapter 10:21. Ji Tianqing picked up the thick black book and studied it carefully. The Heaven Reading Record of the World. These 5 dark golden ancient words were engraved on the cover, having not faded even after tens of thousands of years. The words were vigorous and forceful, revealing a trace of a majestic aura that transcended worldly matters and looked down upon the world. Just from these 5 words alone, Ji Tianqing could tell that a non-primordial spirit supreme expert would definitely not have such an aura. He gently flipped open the cover and saw 2 rows of small golden words engraved on the title page. The mountain is high and I am the peak. Upon encountering the heavenly tribulation, the path becomes void. Ascending the heavens through the 9 transformations of life and death, transcending mortality and becoming a heavenly dragon. Ji Tianqing stared fixedly at these 4 lines, great waves surging in his heart as intense shock flashed in his eyes. Even though it was just a simple 28 words. These words contained the life experiences of the Eastern Mountain Residence's owner, as well as his domineering aura that looked down upon the world, as well as his unfathomable martial attainment. The mountain is high and I am the peak. This clearly meant that the owner of the Eastern Mountain Residence had reached the peak of the primordial spirit realm and stood at the peak of this continent, looking down upon all life under the heavens. Upon encountering the heavenly tribulation, the path becomes void. This described the mysteriousness and terror of the heavenly tribulation. The last 2 lines clearly said that after overcoming the 9 heavenly tribulations, one would be able to ascend the heavens in 9 steps and reach the realm of transcendence. That unfathomable martial saint realm was like a heavenly dragon soaring through the heavens, even able to traverse the heavens and space. However, Ji Tianqing had some doubts. Had the owner of the Eastern Mountain Residence successfully overcome the 9 transformations of the heavenly tribulation and reached the realm of transcendence? Did the so-called heavenly dragon mean becoming a heavenly dragon, or becoming as powerful as a heavenly dragon? Filled with questions, his gaze left those 28 words and landed at the bottom right of the title page. There was the signature of the owner of the Eastern Mountain Residence, for dark golden words. Eastern Mountain Exalt. Ji Tianqing immediately understood when he saw the majestic and flamboyant seal characters. The owner of the Eastern Mountain Residence was known as the Eastern Mountain Exalt. He was definitely a supreme expert at the peak of the primordial spirit realm. As for what had happened to the Eastern Mountain Exalt in the end, and whether he had overcome the heavenly tribulation, he would only know after reading the contents of the ancient records. His gaze fell on the pages of the book, carefully and attentively reading it. The pages of the book were made of a special material. They were cold and tough to the touch. Even after 10,000 years, they did not decay. Densely packed dark golden words were written on it, all of which had been inscribed by the Eastern Mountain Exalt using his immense powers, never to be erased. It was only after Ji Tianqing read through them that he understood that this thick ancient tome recorded the Eastern Mountain Exalt's lifetime of cultivation experiences and insights. This matter had begun to be recalled ever since the Eastern Mountain Exalt had established the Eastern Mountain residence and returned to seclusion. The Eastern Mountain Supreme Being had set up 8 heavenly monitoring divine eyes within the palace, using their great magical power to monitor the 8 directions of the Tianxian land. The 8 heaven-supervising divine eyes could observe the movements of the heavenly stars and monitor the people and all living beings in the world. The Eastern Mountain Exalt sat within the Eastern Mountain residence, watching the stars shift as the sun and moon rose and fell, overlooking the myriad states of the world, the rise and fall of the world, comprehending the great Tao of the heart of the heavens and the earth. In the book of heavenly observation and worldly observation, there were many mysterious celestial phenomena, as well as the ups and downs of the human world. In the 7,200th year of the ancient calendar, on the eastern continent, the cavalry of the devil race swept over with overflowing killing intent. The hundreds of millions of people of the 100 clans of the east were massacred. Thousands of cities and villages were destroyed, and millions of miles of mountains and rivers were dyed red with blood. 100 years later, the first devil emperor led his army into the central region, establishing the imperial court of the devil race and occupying half of the Tianxian land. The people of the various clans were frightened by the might of the devil race, not daring to resist, allowing the devil race to bully and slaughter them. In the 8,000th year of the ancient calendar, the central region stabilized. A mysterious force called the imperial residence appeared out of nowhere, suppressing the imperial court of the devil race and taking control of the central region. The first imperial residence lord fought a decisive battle with the devil emperor above the 9 heavens for half a month. In the end, the devil emperor fell with hatred, while the first imperial residence lord mysteriously disappeared. In the 8,900th year of the ancient calendar, on the southern continent, the human race stood in great numbers, with heroes vying for supremacy. The strongest stood proudly at the peak of the human race, commanding all the humans under the heavens, establishing the imperial court of the human race and entering the central region. In the 9,500th year of the ancient calendar, a civil war broke out among the demon race on the western continent. Hundreds of demon race leaders killed each other. After 100 years of competition, the heaven-covering demon emperor finally appeared, suppressing all the demon races under the heavens, establishing the imperial court of the demon race and entering the central region. In the 10,000th year of the ancient calendar, a strange phenomenon occurred in the starry sky. The 9 star pearls shone upon the world, causing the galaxy to collapse. Billions of meteors fell, shaking the heavens and earth. Within 100 years, peerless geniuses emerged from the various clans of the continent. The geniuses of various clans rose together and competed under the starry sky. In the 1,200th year of the ancient calendar, the various clans of the continent were at their peak. Humans and demons joined forces to fight against the devil race. Hundreds of Supreme Being elite warriors participated in the battle, and thousands of transcendents led the army. In that epic war, the devil emperor and the devil marshal of the current generation all fell. The devil race suffered a great defeat and had to retreat from the central region to the northern desert. From then on, the imperial court of the devil race existed in name only and became history. In the 15,000th year of the ancient calendar, the dark and chaotic ancient era ended, and the Tianxian land welcomed a new era. With the start of the new calendar, the continent was stable and peaceful. The various clans established their territories and boundaries, coexisting peacefully and flourishing. When Ji Tianqing saw these records, countless scenes uncontrollably appeared in his mind, as if he could see the various scenes of the past. That grand and magnificent era, where geniuses rose and dragons competed, caused his heart to surge and his blood to boil. As for the Eastern Mountain Exalt, he had lived in seclusion here for 8,000 years, seeing all the happenings in the world. He had personally witnessed the rise and fall of the various clans, the end of the ancient era, and the arrival of the new era. However, in this process, he had always looked on coldly from the perspective of a bystander, never taking part in it. Whether it was the devil race sweeping through the world and wantonly slaughtering hundreds of millions of common people, or the various clans rising and vying for supremacy, he was indifferent to all of them. It was as if everything in the mortal world had nothing to do with him. He seemed to have become one with the heavens and earth. He was high up, detached from the world, yet cold and emotionless. Ji Tianqing could not understand what the Eastern Mountain Exalt was thinking and feeling when he was recording the various major events of the world. However, as he continued to read the heaven-viewing records of the world, he gradually discovered that although the Eastern Mountain Exalt was a human, he was a human god who had inherited the bloodline of the ancient gods. Before reaching the primordial spirit realm, This person was already obsessed with pursuing the martial Tao, a martial fanatic who did not care about the affairs of the world. When he reached the primordial spirit realm, he saw through the affairs of the world and became indifferent, severing his 7 emotions and 6 desires in order to pursue the great Tao of the heavens and earth. He had seen the prosperity of the mortal world and the suffering of all living beings, all for the sake of comprehending the great Tao from it, and thus overcoming the 9 cycles heavenly tribulation to reach the godly realm. Ji Tianqing felt a sense of familiarity with the Eastern Mountain Exalt's nature and mentality. Chapter 1022. Tai was also obsessed with martial arts and was cold and heartless. In order to pursue a stronger martial arts realm, he could disregard everything and cut off his 7 emotions and 6 desires. He could even give up on his family, friends, and lovers. Such a mentality and disposition was extremely similar to the Eastern Mountain Exalts. Ji Tianqing closed the scroll and pondered for a moment. He then shook his head helplessly and sighed. 1,000 people have 1,000 faces and 100 thoughts. Everyone has different natures and principles, so the way they do things is naturally different. One day, even if I become a primordial soul exalt and stand at the peak of the continent, it would be impossible for me to be as cold and heartless as the Eastern Mountain Exalt. However, humans had their humanity, while gods had their divinity. The Eastern Mountain Exalt is a human divinity, calling himself a divinity. How could he possibly possess humanity? After pondering for a moment, he continued reading. Within the heavenly observation and world records, there were also many interesting stories recorded, as well as the unique scenes that the Eastern Mountain Exalt had seen with his heaven-supervising divine eye. Ji Tianqing noticed that there was a strange story about the demon race recorded in it. It was said that in the early days of ancient times, there were many gods in the world. At that time, the Tian land was still in an uncivilized period and the development of martial arts had yet to reach its peak. However, there were tens of thousands of races on the continent, and there were many deities who preached and taught to all living beings. The tens of thousands of races coexisted peacefully. However, for some unknown reason, one day, the sky suddenly shattered and collapsed. Endless devils descended from the sky and landed on the Tian land. These evil and powerful abyss devils had incomparably strong physiques, power attributes that were different from ordinary people, and bloody and cruel methods to increase their strength. Without a doubt, these evil demons that invaded the Tian land were the Devil Clan. Under the leadership of the primogenitor heavenly demon god, the demon race slaughtered all living beings and plundered the resources and territories of all races in the world. They also fed on flesh, blood, and souls to strengthen themselves and increase their strength. They were like locusts passing through. Wherever they passed, not even a blade of grass would grow, and all life would be plunged into misery and suffering. The rapid development and growth of the demon race had caused panic among all the races in the world and infuriated countless gods. However, the gods of the various races were no match for the primogenitor heavenly devil god. They went forward to besiege the heavenly devil god, but they were killed by the heavenly devil god instead. They became nourishment for the primogenitor heavenly devil god's strength. Later on, the strongest deities of each race joined forces to besiege the heavenly demon god, and they fought fiercely in the starry sky for half a year. In the end, the heavenly demon god was killed by the gods and disappeared from the world. The gods had also paid a heavy price. They had either perished or disappeared without a trace. The most outstanding goddess of the human race, Goddess Yaoguang, hated the demon race to the core. She didn't hesitate to self-detonate, sacrificing her life and godhead to place a bloodline curse on the demon race. Ever since then, the power of the curse flowed through the blood of the demons, and it could never be removed. When the demons were weak, they could still maintain their normal form. As the demon race grew stronger, they would become uglier and more ferocious. Their bodies would become larger, like demons, like giant beasts. Every full moon night, when the 7 stars competed for glory, the demons would reveal their ugly true forms and suffer the pain and torment of having their hearts bitten by thousands of ants. According to legend, it was an eternal curse from the goddess. The demons would be punished for the heinous crimes they had committed, and would repent for all eternity. Of course, these deeds recorded in the ancient books were only ancient myths and legends. The Eastern Mountain Exalt had never experienced the primitive era of the early ancient era, nor had he seen the era where numerous gods existed side by side. These were all legends that he had heard and found interesting, so he recorded them in the Book of Heaven Observation and World Observation. After reading it, Ji Tianqing did not doubt this legend at all. because he knew that the demon race was indeed suffering from some kind of curse and shackle. Not only would they become ugly and ferocious, the growth of their strength would also become slow, and their innate talent would also be limited. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. He had already read more than half of the ancient book, and there were only a dozen or so pages left. These dozen or so pages recorded the Eastern Mountain Exalt's cultivation experiences and comprehensions. An interesting matter was recorded within. The Eastern Mountain Exalt had lived in seclusion at this time, and even though he was alone, he did not feel bored. His greatest hobby was to play chess. Although he was playing chess with himself, seemingly for his own amusement, it was actually a game against the heavens. That ancient beast chess game in the public square was a chess piece in his game against the heavens. Game against the heavens? Back then, when the Eastern Mountain Exalt had reached the peak of the primordial spirit realm, he had endured a total of 9 heavenly tribulations in the 8,000 years he had lived here in seclusion. If he wanted to live on and reach the martial saint realm, he would have to successfully overcome the heavenly tribulations and resolve the 9 cycles heavenly tribulation. In that case, he was really fighting against the heavens. Fighting against the heavens. No wonder I could not understand that chess game in the public square. After all, I have yet to reach the level of the Eastern Mountain Exalt. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly, sighing emotionally. The Eastern Mountain Exalt had fought against the heavens for several thousand years, and the final result was that he had won against Tian Yitzi. Therefore, the Eastern Mountain Exalt had successfully overcome the 9 cycles heavenly tribulation, transcending mortality and becoming a martial saint, reaching the martial saint realm like a heavenly dragon. After becoming a martial saint, the Eastern Mountain Exalt had left the Eastern Mountain residence, walking out of the Eastern Sea's returning ruins. Ji Tianxing did not know where he had gone, and there were no records in the heavenly observation and world records. However, Ji Tianxing believed that the Eastern Mountain Exalt had most likely left the profound sky continent in search of an even higher cultivation level. Before the Eastern Mountain Exalt had left, he had removed 90% of the formations and traps in the Eastern Mountain residence, leaving behind only some basic formations to maintain this secret realm from being destroyed for 10,000 years. At the same time, the Eastern Mountain Exalt had predicted that a certain fated person would appear in the future, coming down to the Eastern Mountain residence by chance. Therefore, he had recorded his lifetime of cultivation experiences in the heavenly observation and world records, leaving it for the fated person to read. Reading up to here, Ji Tianxing was enlightened, his eyes shining as he muttered to himself, "No wonder I could successfully traverse the heaven ascension stairs and arrive at the peak of the mountain. No wonder I could break through the palace's protective grand formation and open its gates to come here." It turns out that after the Eastern Mountain Exalt had become a martial saint, he had intentionally removed 90% of the formations, intending to leave this cave residence to the fated person. Without a doubt, he was the first fated person to enter the Eastern Mountain residence in 10,000 years. Feeling rather agitated, he hurriedly read the words recorded on the last 10-odd pages. Those were the cultivation experiences and comprehensions of the Eastern Mountain Exalt, from the heavenly origin stage to the soul refinement stage, and then to the primordial spirit stage. Although those experiences and comprehensions were scattered, appearing profound and obscure, leaving one unable to make sense of them. However, Ji Tianxing was talented and intelligent. Having understood the Eastern Mountain Exalt's life experiences, he was able to guess the Eastern Mountain Exalt's mentality and thoughts. He sat in the dusky ancient study, holding the heavenly observation and world records with both hands, looking extremely engrossed and entranced. Time passed silently. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. 10 days passed. For 10 whole days, Ji Tianxing was like an old monk in meditation, not moving in the slightest like a boulder. It was only at noon on the 11th day that he seemed to have awoken from a dream, coming to a realization. Chapter 1023. Ji Tianxing knew very well that the cultivation of the martial Tao was difficult. It was not easy to become an expert. Abundant cultivation resources could produce Yuan Dan stage experts, but not Sky Origin stage experts. To reach the heavenly origin stage, not only did one need abundant cultivation resources, one also needed extraordinary talent and aptitude. And for a heavenly origin stage expert to break through the shackles of mortals and reach the transcendent soul refinement stage, it was incomparably difficult. Not only did one need abundant resources and outstanding talent, one also needed to have a tenacious and indomitable heart, as well as great opportunities and luck. Ji Tianxing had abundant resources and treasures, monstrous talent, and tenacious heart, but he had never been able to obtain any opportunities. Thus, he had remained at the 9th level of the heavenly origin stage for a very long time. Now, he had inadvertently entered the Eastern Mountain residence, understood the Eastern Mountain Exalt's past, and read the Heaven Viewing World Record. Without a doubt, his opportunity had come. This Heaven Viewing Records of the world was his great fortune. After 10 days of meditation, fully focused on comprehending, he had finally comprehended the Eastern Mountain Exalt's transcendent insights, and found a strange way to break through. He immediately closed the Heaven Viewing World Record, sitting cross-legged in the study, waving his palms to form seals as he began to circulate and cultivate. Swoosh! His entire body surged with multicolored spiritual light, releasing an incomparably powerful aura. His aura rose unceasingly, his strength surging violently, gradually reaching the peak. Within the study, a violent hurricane arose, sweeping up dust and gravel into the sky outside the door. And he sat in the center of the storm, as steady as a rock, his entire body surging with a powerful aura comparable to a second-level soul refinement stage expert. He had already activated his lifetime's worth of cultivation, controlling the golden sword heart in his chest, tempering it to the limit. Time passed quickly. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days passed. And he had completely forgotten himself, forgotten time, forgotten everything around him. He entered the ethereal state of being one with the heavens. His body merged with the heavens and earth, borrowing the power of the heavens and earth in the Eastern Mountain residence to temper his sword heart repeatedly. Very quickly, another 10 days passed. The finger-sized golden sword heart had been tempered to the limit by him, condensing it to the most tenacious and powerful level. Of course, the sword heart had become the size of a toothpick, but its power had doubled. He began to manipulate the heart of the sword. It left his chest and entered his blood vessels, slowly flying towards his mind. This process was extremely slow, and he had to endure the pain of 10,000 swords piercing his heart. The incomparable pain caused his entire body to tremble violently like a sieve. Beads of sweat the size of beans emerged from the 36,000 pores on his body, covering his face and body, wetting his long hair and white robe. It was even to the extent that the blood vessels all over his body were bulging, and his veins were bulging. Even his bones were emitting cracking sounds as if they were about to break. Fortunately, he had already mastered the ultimate sword body, and his physical body was as strong as a soul-grade magic treasure. If it were a normal cultivator in the 9th level of Sky Origin Realm, his physical body would have been destroyed long ago. 3 days later, Ji Tianqing endured 3 days of torment, as if he had walked through hell and experienced death. Fortunately, he was able to move the sword heart into his mind and fuse it with his soul. Originally, before he reached the soul refinement realm, he had never cultivated and strengthened his soul. However, he almost lost his life in order to resist the Fiend Emperor back then. It was Yun Yao who used the Nirvana Divine Crystal to save him. After he obtained the Heaven Mending Pearl, the Nirvana Divine Crystal completely released its power in the sacred white light of the Heaven Mending Pearl, fusing with his soul. Although he had never taken the initiative to cultivate his soul was strengthened by the Nirvana Divine Crystal, comparable to a first-level soul refinement expert. In this half a year, the Heaven Mending Pearl fused with his soul, and also strengthened his soul several times. When the sword heart entered his mind and started fusing with his soul, he undoubtedly had to endure the pain of his soul being torn apart. However, with the Heaven Mending Pearl's protection and help, it reduced the soul-tearing pain to the extreme. Ji Tianqing was able to endure such inhuman pain and torment. Relying on his powerful willpower, he gritted his teeth and persevered. He used a secret art, borrowed the power of the Heaven Mending Pearl, and gradually fused with the sword heart, to condense his divine soul. Time passed quickly. Unknowingly, another half a month passed. His sword heart and soul were only half condensed. He was still very far from success. After a month, the sword heart and soul had fused 90%, and he was about to succeed. His true essence and mind had been overused, and he was about to faint. However, he absolutely could not fail. Otherwise, all of his previous efforts would be for naught. He relied on his incomparably tenacious willpower, the Heaven Mending Pearl, and the power of the Kenshin bloodline to stubbornly endure. After a month and a half, he finally succeeded in fusing his sword heart and soul, forming a golden sword-shaped divine soul. Almost all of the soul refinement realm cultivators' souls were balls of white light, about the size of an egg. and his divine soul was so special. It was actually a small golden sword. He called it Sword Soul. At noon on this day, his entire body released a sword light that soared into the sky, bursting with a sword intent that covered the sky. With a loud rumbling sound, the entire study and half of the palace were shattered by the sword intent that soared into the sky, collapsing into ruins. In the dust that covered the sky, Ji Tianqing finished cultivating. He walked out in high spirits, and arrived in the air above the palace. He stood in the air, looking down on the world with a calm expression. His entire body was bursting with the domineering aura of a powerhouse that looked down on the world. Without a doubt, he had successfully broken through the shackles of mortals, condensing a sword soul, and reached the first level of the soul refinement realm. From this moment on, he was no longer a mortal, but a transcendent powerhouse. His lifespan had reached 1,000 years. He had become an immortal in the eyes of mortals, immortal and immortal. The only vital point in his body was his divine soul. Even if his body was destroyed into powder, as long as his divine soul was not destroyed, he would not die. His strength had also increased by 5 times, and he had stepped into a whole new level and domain. The current him was only a first-level soul refinement realm expert. But if he met a third-level soul refinement realm expert, he could easily defeat them. Even if it was a 4th-level soul refinement realm expert, he could fight to a draw, and even have a chance of winning. Whoosh! Ji Tianqing's mind stirred, and he summoned the sword soul in his sea of consciousness. The toothpick-sized golden sword soul hovered quietly in his palm, shimmering with a resplendent golden light and bursting with a sword intent that seemed to be able to rip the world apart. He stared at the sword spirit silently as a gratified smile appeared in his eyes. He muttered to himself, "I originally thought that I would need to find the boundless stone and strengthen the broken sword before I could borrow the power of the divine sword to break through to the spirit-refining realm. To think that the heavens would look after me and allow me to obtain such an opportunity to advance to the soul refinement realm in advance. Not only is the Eastern Mountain Exalt's Heaven Viewing Record of the World an unparalleled book that records the events of the past and present, it is also a secret manual that leads to the primordial spirit realm. It is worthy of being treasured and comprehended by me throughout my life." Chapter 1024. Ji Tianqing was completely satisfied. Although his trip to the East Sea's returning ruins this time had been extremely dangerous, he had also reaped great rewards. Not only had he obtained over 10 incomparably precious mineral veins, he had even found the boundless stone. And the most precious thing was that he had inadvertently entered Eastern Mountain Residence and obtained the Heaven Viewing World Reading Record. The dusty history and ancient secrets were revealed in this ancient book. The cultivation experiences and comprehensions of an essence spirit supreme were presented in this ancient book. To Ji Tianqing, this was absolutely a priceless treasure. He solemnly kept the Heaven Viewing World Reading Record, storing it in his spatial ring. As long as he had the time in the future, he would definitely read this ancient book repeatedly. However, that was a matter for the future. He stood in the air above Eastern Mountain Residence, releasing formless spiritual power that spread out in all directions, enveloping the entire mountain peak. Unfortunately, although Eastern Mountain Residence was majestic, it was built extremely simply and plain. There was only a palace on the mountain peak, with no other residences or buildings. Ji Tianqing thought that the Eastern Mountain Exalt was probably already standing at the peak of the mortal realm, having reached the realm of returning to simplicity and fighting against the heavens. There was no need for those gaudy buildings to decorate his cave abode. Moreover, he had searched the entire mountain peak with his spiritual power, yet did not find any other valuable treasures. There were no divine weapons or martial arts legacies. When the Eastern Mountain Exalt had left Eastern Mountain Residence, he had only left behind a study full of ancient books. 10,000 years had passed, and those ancient books had all turned to dust, with only the Heaven Viewing World Reading Record remaining till now. Ji Tianqing felt a little regretful as he could only take down the golden bricks on the floor of the palace and the jade screens embedded in the walls, keeping them in his spatial ring. The golden bricks on the floor were not ordinary gold, but refined from stellar gold sand. Such stellar gold sand bricks were extremely rare in the current world, and would usually only appear in broken fragments, yet they could also be sold for astonishing prices. Ji Tianqing had dug up over 400 pieces, which could be sold for 3 to 500 million spirit stones at the very least. As for the jade screens embedded in the walls, they were also not ordinary spirit jades, but spirit-gathering jade. Those were precious gems that soul refinement realm cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. They had the miraculous effect of condensing one's mind and tempering one's soul. Most of the spirit-congealing jades that had appeared in the Middle State continent were palm-sized and were worth 20 to 30 million spirit stones. Moreover, they were priceless. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, directly moved 4 jade screens, which were as big as 4 walls. He could not estimate how much these 4 huge pieces of spirit-condensing jades could be sold for. Of course, he had no intention of selling it. Such an excellent treasure naturally had to be made into a praying mat or a throne for him to use during cultivation. After confirming that there were no more treasures in the Eastern Mountain residence, Ji Tianqing turned to leave. Just as he was about to fly down the mountain, he noticed a sudden change in heaven and earth. The clear sky was shattering, the towering mountains were crumbling, and the remaining half of the palace was rapidly collapsing into ruins. The entire Eastern Mountain residence was collapsing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was falling apart and shattering. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky, frowning as he looked at all of this. His expression became somewhat solemn. This cave-dwelling secret realm is actually about to be destroyed. Has the energy maintaining the secret realm been exhausted? Or is it a formation left behind by the Eastern Mountain Exalt that wants to destroy this secret realm? He was filled with doubts, yet no one could answer him. Just at this moment, he saw a gate condensed from white light appear in the sky before him. The gate of white light that was over 10 feet tall was like a spatial teleportation gate, flickering with a dazzling brilliance. Ji Tianqing looked at the collapsing sky and earth, watching as the cave-dwelling secret realm was rapidly collapsing. Without hesitation, he flew towards that teleportation gate. Whoosh! When he flew to the side of the teleportation gate, he stopped and turned his head to look behind him. He took a final look at the Eastern Mountain residence that was about to dissipate, bowing with a sincere expression as he murmured softly, "Eastern Mountain Exalt, although I cannot agree with your way of doing things and your way of thinking, I still have to thank you for giving me such a great opportunity in these 10,000 years." With that, he turned and stepped into the spatial teleportation gate. The next moment, his figure was swallowed up by the white light, vanishing. Not long after, the Eastern Mountain residence completely collapsed, the entire cave-dwelling secret realm dissipating. Whoosh! Ji Tianqing only saw a white light flash before his eyes as he left the Eastern Mountain residence secret realm, returning to the dark, cold underground. He appeared above the silver mineral vein, standing at the edge of that black hole. 5 steps away from him, on the other side of the black hole, the Golden Mountain King was holding his dark golden warhammer with both hands, looking at the black hole with anxiety and anticipation, muttering something. Young Master Ji, why haven't you come out yet? I can't contact you at all, and I don't know where you've gone or what kind of danger you've encountered. Sigh, this is too worrying. If something happens to you, how can I? The Golden Mountain King was only halfway through his words when he saw a blur before his eyes as a white-robed youth appeared out of thin air. He was instantly stunned, staring at the white-robed youth with wide eyes, all of his worry and anxiety instantly vanishing into nothingness. Young Master Ji. You've actually... Oh no, you've finally come back. The Golden Mountain King came back to his senses. His eyes lit up with joy and excitement. He threw away his dark golden warhammer, took 2 steps forward excitedly, and stretched out his arms to hug Ji Tianqing's legs. Ji Tianqing saw his excited reaction and smiled with relief. He bent over and patted his shoulder, comforting him. Golden Mountain King, I've made you worry. When I went in, I was wondering why you didn't follow me. It seems that there must be something wrong with the space tunnel, so you didn't come in, right? The Golden Mountain King nodded and hurriedly explained. Yes. Young Master Ji, after you entered the space vortex, I immediately followed you. However, no one expected that the space vortex would suddenly disappear. I had no choice but to stay here and wait for you to come out. I don't know where you've been or if you've encountered any danger, so I've been very worried about you these past few days. These past few days? Ji Tianqing's expression suddenly changed, and he frowned in confusion. That's strange, I've been in there for 2 months. The Golden Mountain King was also puzzled, and he asked, Young Master Ji, since you went in, today is the 4th day. Don't you remember? Ji Tianqing saw that the Golden Mountain King's expression was sincere, and he did not seem to be lying, so he immediately understood. Oh, I understand now. The Eastern Mountain residence is an alternate space, where the flow of time is different from the outside world. 2 months in the Mystery Land is actually only 4 days in the outside world. He felt lucky that the Eastern Mountain residence was so miraculous that it saved him 2 months of time. At this moment, the Golden Mountain King suddenly noticed the change in his strength and temperament, and his eyes widened in shock. Chapter 1025. The Jinshan King was dumbfounded. He stared at Ji Tianqing, dumbfounded. It was as if he was dreaming. He couldn't believe it. He had been stuck at the 9th level of the Sky Origin stage for 8 years before he finally reached the Soul Refining stage. Ji Tianqing was still in the Sky Origin stage 4 days ago. Now, he had reached the Soul Refining stage after entering the Mystery Realm. How could the Jinshan King not be shocked? He used to be the most powerful man and the most talented man in the Earth Spirit clan. But only now did he realize that compared to Ji Tianqing, he was simply beaten to the point where not even dregs were left. Seeing his reaction, Ji Tianqing patted his shoulder and comforted him with a smile. Jinshan King, don't be so surprised. In fact, the time flow in the Mystery Realm is different from the outside world. Only 4 days have passed in the outside world, but I have been in there for 2 months. 2 months? The Jinshan King's eyes widened in shock. You've reached the Soul Refining Realm in just 2 months. You're a rare genius. He exclaimed. All right, young Master Ji, what is the Mystery Realm in there? Can you tell me more about it? Ji Tianqing looked at him and pointed at the rock layer not far away. He said, I will tell you more about the Mystery Realm when we have time. Right now, we need to figure out how to deal with the 4 red flame pterosaurs. Also, we need to find a way to move the star vein away. The Jinshan King turned around and looked at the rock layer. He saw the 4 red flame pterosaurs on the other side of the rock layer. They were roaring and emitting strong battle intent. They seemed to have realized that the mysterious power that scared them had disappeared. Therefore, they started to make strange sounds to summon the other pterosaurs on the island. They were ready to attack Ji Tianqing and the Jinshan King together. Seeing this, the Jinshan King clenched his warhammer with both hands, his body surging with battle intent. He said in a deep voice, Humph! This group of reckless pterosaurs was really courting their own deaths. Young Master Ji, it just so happens that you've just broken through to the Soul Refining Realm. Why don't you use these winged dragons to practice? Hee, that's exactly what I was thinking. Ji Tianqing grinned, revealing a playful sneer. Jinshan King, you stay here and study how to excavate this star vein. I'll go play with those pterosaurs. The Jinshan King shook his head and said, No. This won't do. Young Master Ji, this humble prince is definitely not someone who is afraid of death. How can I let you face those winged dragons alone? This little king wants to fight alongside you and eliminate those pterosaurs. Ji Tianqing waved his hand. His tone was calm, but it contained an unquestionable meaning. Jinshan King, there's no need to argue. You stay here and excavate the mineral veins as soon as possible. After saying that, his body flashed with a dark yellow light, and he passed through the 1,000-meter-thick rock layer, flying toward the 4 red flame pterosaurs. The Jinshan King was stunned for a moment. He gripped his dark golden warhammer tightly, wanting to follow and fight alongside Ji Tianqing. However, he could not disobey Ji Tianqing's words. After hesitating for a moment, he suppressed his worries and carried his warhammer into the mineral veins, thinking about how to excavate the mineral veins. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing's sudden attack startled the 4 red flame pterosaurs. They all retreated to keep a distance from Ji Tianqing. However, when they thought that Ji Tianqing was going to attack, Ji Tianqing quickly left and flew toward the surface. They immediately thought that Ji Tianqing was going to run away. They roared angrily and chased after him. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Ji Tianqing and the 4 red flame pterosaurs turned into 5 dazzling lights and quickly passed through the thousands of meters underground. In just 10 breaths' time, they emerged from the ground and flew into the sky above the island. It was afternoon now. The sky was covered by thin clouds, and the dim sunlight could be faintly seen. Ji Tianqing flew into the sky and stood still. He stretched out his right hand. A light flashed in his palm, and a dark and cold broken sword appeared. He held the broken sword in his hand and looked down at the ground expressionlessly. He thought to himself, now that I've reached the soul refining stage, I can finally cultivate the Sword Soul Dao and my self-created Sword Soul battle technique. When the burial of heaven wakes up, I'll let it teach me the Sword Soul art. By then, my combat strength will definitely increase by several times. At this moment, the 4 red flame pterosaurs emerged from the ground and flew into the sky. They spread out and surrounded him. Roar! Roar! The 4 red flame pterosaurs let out earth-shattering roars. Their eyes were filled with anger and killing intent. They flapped their wide wings and stirred up tornadoes. Their bodies were surging with rising flames. Within a 10-mile radius, the temperature suddenly rose. The air was filled with flames. Ji Tianxing was not afraid. The true essence in his body surged and surged. His aura was extraordinary. He growled with killing intent. This is my first battle after breaking through to the soul refining stage. It's your honor to be able to die under my divine sword. As soon as he finished speaking, he brazenly swung his sword, exploding with incomparably vigorous energy. He fiercely slashed out a sword light that could split the heavens and earth. Metal Emperor Slash. The 100-meter-long golden sword light slashed toward one of the red flame pterosaurs with an indestructible power. On the surface, this sword light looked no different from the Metal Emperor Slash he used 4 days ago. But in reality, its power had increased by about 5 times. Ji Tianxing, who had broken through to the soul refining stage, had been reborn. He was extraordinary. The speed of this Metal Emperor Slash was extremely fast. The red flame pterosaur had no time to dodge and was hit by the sword light. Bam! With a dull thud, the scarlet flame pterosaur was sliced in half by the giant sword. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. A 3rd-level soul refining stage red flame pterosaur was cut in half by Ji Tianxing. Moreover, he had not used his full strength. He had only used 80% of his power. Such a terrifying power stunned the other 3 red flame pterosaurs. Their eyes were filled with fear. Among the pieces of flesh flying in the air, there was a fist-sized dark red crystal and a ball of white light. The ball of white light was the red flame pterosaur's soul crystal. It flew away in fear, trying to escape from this place. The dark red crystal that fell from the sky was the demon core that it had condensed its entire life's worth of power. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and caught the pure demon core in his hand. He kept it in his interspatial ring. He waved his sword again and slashed the red flame pterosaur's soul crystal into pieces. Thus, the red flame pterosaur died just like that. The other 3 red flame pterosaurs finally regained their senses. They roared angrily and charged toward him. They spat out torrential flames and released more than 10 destructive attacks. They attacked Ji Tianxing with all their might. Chapter 10:26. The 3 scarlet flaming pterosaurs attacked Ji Tianxing with all their might. They used all kinds of attacks, releasing flames and light blades that covered the sky and covered the earth, drowning Ji Tianxing's figure. Rumble! Loud noises continued to erupt and resounded throughout the entire island. The forest and land within a radius of dozens of miles were burned into scorched earth, raising dust into the sky. The earth-shattering battle caused the entire island to tremble and shake. Numerous cracks appeared on the ground, and monstrous waves surged around the island. Ji Tianxing shuttled through the sea of fire, withstanding the attacks of all kinds of flowing light blades, but he was still safe and sound. He relied on his extremely powerful sword body and spiritual energy to protect himself, blocking all the attacks. And the ultimate killing move he released with all his strength was difficult for the 3 scarlet flaming pterosaurs to block. White Tiger Sacred Sword. With a wave of the broken sword, a 100-meter-long giant sword wrapped in a mountain-like white tiger phantom slashed at one of the scarlet flaming pterosaurs. Bang! The scarlet flaming pterosaur was split in half on the spot. Its head was separated from its body, and it fell from the sky like a rain of blood. The dark red monster core was still in the corpse, but its soul crystal was flashing with white light. It panicked and fled into the depths of the island. Ji Tianxing chased after it and slashed out a shocking sword light again. This sword light contained the power of the spirit. When it hit the soul crystal, it shattered into pieces. A scarlet flaming pterosaur at the 3rd level of the soul refinement realm had its body destroyed and spiritual energy destroyed in one strike. It was completely dead. The other 2 scarlet flaming pterosaurs rushed over and attacked him fiercely, sending him flying. But he was not injured even after flying 1,000 meters away. He swung his sword at another scarlet flaming pterosaur. Vermilion Bird's Sacred Sword. The broken sword slashed out a 100-meter-long giant sword light, carrying a huge vermilion bird phantom, and hit another scarlet flaming pterosaur. Boom! With a loud bang, the scarlet flaming pterosaur was also split in half. Two huge pieces of its body fell from the sky and crashed onto the ground. The scarlet flame pterosaur had learned to be smart. Its soul crystal didn't fly away from the sky. Instead, it burrowed into the ground, trying to escape through the ground. However, this couldn't escape Ji Tianxing's eyes. He swung his sword and slashed out a sword ray. It slashed into the ground, creating a wide gully and shattering the soul crystal into pieces. The second scarlet flame pterosaur was also killed by Ji Tianxing. The last remaining scarlet flame pterosaur had reached the 4th level of the soul refining realm and was the strongest leader on this island. However, it had witnessed several of its companions being killed one after another. It had long been scared out of its wits by Ji Tianxing's invincible might. Even though its strength was much higher than Ji Tianxing's, it still lost its fighting spirit and quickly turned around to flee. Ji Tianxing chased after him without hesitation. He brandished the broken sword with all his might and performed 2 moves. Azure Dragon's Sacred Sword. Black Tortoise Sacred Sword. These 2 moves were powerful sword techniques that he had comprehended and learned from Kenshin's inheritance. When he was in the Heaven Origin realm, he couldn't fully comprehend these 2 sword techniques, so he had never used them. However, after he reached the soul refining realm, his understanding of the sword Dao had deepened. Therefore, he was able to use these 2 moves naturally. The giant sword that was 100 meters long was like an azure dragon flashing with azure light. It descended from the sky and blasted towards the scarlet flame pterosaur. Bang! With a deafening sound, the scarlet flame pterosaur was blasted away by the giant sword. It crashed onto the ground covered in blood. It was heavily injured. Its back was badly mangled and bleeding. It was still desperately flapping its broken wings, trying to fly back to the sky. However, a giant black sword that was wrapped in the shadow of a black tortoise slashed down. Boom! With a deafening sound, the giant shadow of a black tortoise slammed into the scarlet flame pterosaur. The scarlet flame pterosaur's body collapsed and exploded into pieces of flesh. The scarlet flame pterosaur's body was destroyed. The only thing left was its soul crystal. It still wanted to escape underground. Ji Tianxing brandished the broken sword again. He activated his majestic spiritual energy and slashed out fiercely. Bang! The scarlet flame pterosaur's soul crystal exploded into dozens of white pieces and scattered on the ground. By now, all 4 scarlet flame pterosaurs had been killed. From Ji Tianxing's attack to the death of all 4 scarlet flame pterosaurs, it had been less than 100 breaths. Moreover, he had killed all 4 scarlet flame pterosaurs and was still unharmed. Even he himself found it unbelievable that he was so powerful. 4 days ago, the Golden Mountain King and I worked together, but we were still defeated by a few scarlet flame pterosaurs. But now, I can easily kill them all with my own strength. I didn't expect that the gap between the 1st level of the soul refining realm and the 9th level of the sky origin stage could be so huge. The soul refining realm is indeed an extraordinary realm of martial arts. It has all kinds of unimaginable abilities. It is beyond the imagination of mortals. He looked at the sky in front of him and saw 3 smaller scarlet flame pterosaurs on the other side of the island. They were flying away in a panic. Apparently, the 3 scarlet flame pterosaurs were scared out of their wits. They didn't dare to stay on the island and could only run away. Ji Tianxing didn't chase after the 3 scarlet flame pterosaurs. He put away the broken sword and landed on the ground. He found 3 more monster cores and dozens of white pieces of soul crystal from the corpses of the scarlet flame pterosaurs. There were 4 monster cores in total. All of them contained pure and powerful energy. They were like 4 burning fireballs. The dozens of pieces of soul crystal were condensed from the souls of the 4 scarlet flame pterosaurs. They contained immense soul energy. For burial of heaven, the monster cores and soul crystals of soul refining realm demon beasts were supplements that could replenish its energy. A long time ago, when Ji Tianxing was traveling in the buried Star Sea, he had hunted down half-step soul refining realm demon beasts and used their monster cores and soul crystals to help burial of heaven recover its energy. Now that he was in the Eastern Sea and had reached the soul refining realm, he could easily kill soul refining realm demon beasts. Of course, he wouldn't let go of these monster cores and soul crystals. Whoosh! He activated the mysterious black hole in the center of his right palm and devoured the 4 monster cores and dozens of pieces of soul crystal to help burial of heaven recover its energy. The scarlet flame pterosaurs on the island were either dead or had escaped. The island was now completely safe. Ji Tianqing returned to the depth of 5,000 meters and arrived at the star mineral vein. The Golden Mountain King had already thought of a way to excavate the star vein. He was carrying the dark golden hammer and working hard to excavate the vein. When he saw that Ji Tianqing had returned safely, he was both happy and surprised. He asked, "Young Master Ji, I heard that you were fighting so fiercely just now. How did it end so quickly? Did you chase away all the scarlet flame pterosaurs?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, "I killed the 4 scarlet flame pterosaurs. There were still 3 young scarlet flame pterosaurs on the island. They all ran away in fear." "What?" The Golden Mountain King's eyes immediately widened. He exclaimed in disbelief, "Young Master Ji, you killed all 4 scarlet flame pterosaurs in just 100 breaths." Chapter 10:27. Ever since the Jinshan King met Ji Tianqing, he would be shocked every few days. He had been shocked so many times that he was starting to get numb to it. By now, he had witnessed Ji Tianqing create too many miracles with his own eyes. No matter what earth-shattering things Ji Tianqing did, he would not be too shocked. After a while, he calmed down and joined forces with Ji Tianqing to excavate the star lode. Although the star lode was more than 10 miles long, it was as huge as a mountain range. But both of them were powerhouses in the soul refining realm, and the Jinshan King was a great master in mining. Ji Tianqing opened the exit of the Sword World and asked the Jinshan King to gather hundreds of Earth Spirit craftsmen. The 2 of them led hundreds of Earth Spirit craftsmen. In just 6 hours, they had excavated the entire star lode and stored it in the Sword World. Ji Tianqing did not need to worry about what happened next. He left the depths of the underground and returned to the top of the island. He was about to leave this place. The Jinshan King stayed in the Sword World and led the hundreds of Earth Spirit craftsmen to bury the star lode in the mountains. The star lode would continue to grow and produce more star lode in the future. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and looked down at the entire island. He took a deep look at the devastated and ruined island and was about to turn and leave. However, he had just flown a few hundred miles away from the island. In the sky behind him to the left, a huge black aura suddenly appeared, and a tall and burly figure flew over. Swoosh! In just a few breaths, the black figure caught up with Ji Tianqing and blocked his way. The black figure stood in the air 1,000 meters in front of him and looked at him coldly. His whole body was emitting a piercing killing intent. "Kid, I have said that I will kill you even if I have to chase you to the end of the world." The black figure grinned and shouted in a cold voice. Only then did Ji Tianqing see clearly that the black shadow was a tall and sturdy man with 2 heads. He was over 3 meters tall. This person had long grayish-white hair and a black dragon horn on his forehead. There were many warts on his temples and a long and narrow scar on the right side of his head. Without a doubt, this burly man with a cold aura was the ancient mutated beast, Illumination Dragon. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, then immediately reacted, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a mocking sneer. "Zhu Long, I really didn't expect that you were so eager to die that you actually chased me all the way here. I wanted to find you for revenge, but I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to my doorstep. You've come at the right time. Today, we'll settle our grudges here. I'll skin you alive, pull out your tendons, and grind your bones to dust." As he spoke, Ji Tianqing's body also surged with a biting cold killing intent. A black light flashed in his right palm, and a broken black sword appeared. Illumination Dragon looked greedily at the broken sword of Burial of Heaven in his hand, then sized him up and immediately frowned. "Heh. I didn't expect you to break through your shackles and reach the soul refinement realm after not seeing you for a few days. No wonder you're so arrogant. However, this king will soon let you know that even though you've broken through to the soul refinement realm, you're still as weak as a dog in front of this king. A few days ago, this king was able to beat you until you fled like a stray dog. Today, this king won't even let you have the chance to escape. You'll definitely die. Your innate bloodline and that magic dagger in your hand will also be in this king's pocket." Hearing his words, Ji Tianqing immediately understood. No wonder Illumination Dragon was unwilling to give up after chasing him for tens of thousands of miles. "Hee, you want to steal my innate bloodline and divine sword? What a coincidence. I wanted to strip you of your dragon tendons, dragon bones, dragon blood, and dragon crystal. Cut the crap, Illumination Dragon, prepare to die." Ji Tianqing gave a low shout, his body bursting with fighting intent as he brazenly brandished his sword towards Illumination Dragon. White Tiger Sacred Sword. He held the broken sword with both hands and activated all his strength, brazenly slashing out 100-meter-long giant sword beam. White light lingered around the sword beam, condensing into the phantom of a white tiger. It was as large as a mountain, its claws and teeth extended, carrying with it a monstrous murderous aura. Illumination Dragon's eyes flashed coldly as he angrily scolded. "Little worm, do you really think you're strong just because you've broken through to the soul refinement realm? You actually dare to take the initiative to attack this king?" As he spoke, he waved his palms, releasing a monstrous black light that condensed into two mountain-like claws, brazenly slapping towards the giant sword beam. Heaven-seizing claw. Kaboom! The two shocking giant claws ruthlessly slammed into the white tiger sacred sword, shattering the white tiger phantom on the spot with an earth-shattering sound. The heaven-seizing claw also shattered, turning into black fragments that scattered across the sky. However, that giant sword beam did not lose its power, and with a bang, it struck Illumination Dragon. With a muffled sound, Illumination Dragon was sent flying by the giant sword, only stopping 1,000 meters away. He lowered his head to look at his chest, and saw that the giant sword had pierced a bowl-sized bloody hole between his chest and abdomen, with black blood oozing out. The intense pain caused him to frown fiercely, the veins all over his body bulging, surging with rage. "Little bastard! How dare you injure this king? You're not bad. After breaking through to the soul refinement realm, you're actually qualified to be this king's opponent. Very good. This king will use the cruelest and most vicious method to blast you into pieces and crush you into powder." Illumination Dragon roared furiously, a shocking black light gushing out of his body, and his figure flashed, revealing his true form. Roar! With an earth-shattering dragon roar, he turned into a pitch-black dragon that was 1,000 meters long with 2 heads. "Little bastard! Go to hell!" Illumination Dragon coiled high in the sky, looking down at Ji Tianqing, and let out a furious roar. 9 Flames God-slaying sword. He waved his giant dragon claws, opened his huge dragon mouth, and released 18 giant flaming swords of different colors, blasting towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing had already seen the power of this secret technique, so of course, he did not dare to let his guard down. He immediately took out his magic treasure, the green light treasure tree, and released a vast amount of magic power, activating the power of the green light treasure tree. Swoosh! The 1-foot-tall green light treasure tree flashed with a dazzling green light, and immediately became a 1,000-meter-tall ancient tree. The ancient tree had billions of green branches, gushing with rich green light, protecting Ji Tianqing. Bam bam bam! The 18 giant flaming swords all hit the green light treasure tree, exploding with the power of 9 different attributes. The earth-shattering sound reverberated over the sea for a long time, reverberating fiercely in the air for a long time. Brilliant 5-colored flames shot into the sky, enveloping an area of 10 miles, turning the area into a 5-colored sea of fire. The dark sky for dozens of miles was lit up by the soaring flames. The giant green light treasure tree was also engulfed by the flames, and could not be seen at all. It was obvious that Illumination Dragon was truly enraged, and had used all his strength. Chapter 1028. Soon, Ji Tianqing and the green light treasure tree were engulfed by the overwhelming flames. Everything within a radius of dozens of miles had turned into a world of flames. Even the surface of the sea down below had been evaporated by the raging fire, forming a gigantic whirlpool that had a radius of tens of miles. The 1,000-meter-tall green light treasure tree had tens of thousands of green branches that were set ablaze and turned to ashes in the fire. The torch dragon stood high in the sky and looked down at the world of flames and the sea below, revealing a contemptuous sneer. "Ha ha ha, little bastard, with your insignificant strength, you dare to fight with this king?" However, as soon as it finished speaking, the flames gradually extinguished and a dazzling green light lit up the sky again. The 1,000-meter-tall cyan light treasure tree once again revealed its gigantic figure, standing tall in the sky. Although tens of thousands of branches on the tree had been burned and there were many pitch-black holes, there were still hundreds of millions of branches on the tree. However, there were hundreds of millions of branches on the entire tree. Even if tens of thousands of branches were lost, it would not be a big deal. Swoosh! With a flash of green light, the tree shrunk thousands of times and became only a foot tall. Ji Tianqing's figure appeared, standing in the sky unscathed, holding the green light treasure tree in his palm. Seeing this scene, Zhu Long's eyes immediately widened, revealing a look of deep shock. It simply couldn't believe that Ji Tianqing was actually able to block its ultimate killer move. Lightning! Just as it was in a daze, Ji Tianqing put away the green light treasure tree and suddenly shouted, opening the third eye on his forehead. In the golden eye, the blue pupil released the power of lightning that could destroy the world. It condensed into a pillar of lightning and blasted at the torch dragon. The torch dragon was caught off guard. When it came back to its senses and wanted to dodge, it was too late. Kaboom! Amidst a deafening boom, the lightning beam struck the torch dragon, causing it to cry out in pain as it was sent flying. The crackling lightning arcs enveloped its enormous body, charring it to the point that it was as black as charcoal, causing it to twitch wildly. It was incomparably furious. It opened its mouth and let out an angry roar, but it emitted black smoke. Under the heavy injuries, not only did it look battered and exhausted, even its body was somewhat numb, and its combat strength was greatly weakened. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to pursue and launch a fierce attack. Burning Sky Palm. He raised his left arm that was as red as magma and released endless crimson fire. It condensed into a giant flaming palm that was as big as a mountain and slammed it toward the torch dragon. Roar! The torch dragon raised its head unyieldingly and let out an earth-shattering roar. It struggled with all its might, twisting its mountain-like body in an attempt to avoid the attack of the burning sky palm. However, its speed was too slow, and it was unable to dodge in the end. Boom! Amidst a dull, loud sound, its body was hit by the giant flaming palm, and half of its body sank into the sea of fire. The violent and peerless power slapped it away, and it crashed heavily onto an island 20 miles away. Boom! A 10-mile-long ravine was formed on the island, and dust and gravel splashed into the sky. The torch dragon was charred and covered in blood as it lay in the ravine, moaning in pain. The turbulent seawater immediately surged into the ravine and quickly filled it up. The torch dragon struggled for a moment before it got up from the ravine. Its body was surging with a vast black smoke, and it quickly suppressed its injuries and healed the wounds that were full of devastation. Although its dragon body was still intact, it was not destroyed. However, it was severely injured again and again, and its strength was quickly drained, and its combat strength was weakened by as much as 40%. It flew into the sky with a belly full of rage. When it saw Ji Tianqing charging toward it, it desperately released all its strength and performed its strongest killing move. Raging flames of destruction. It roared wildly, and its body was ignited with blood-red flames. It released an overwhelming dragon breath that turned into more than a dozen enormous dragon breath fire pillars that blasted toward Ji Tianqing. Seeing more than a dozen dragon breath fire pillars appear, Ji Tianqing's face immediately turned serious, and his eyes flashed with thick killing intent. When he was in the imperial court of the water race, Tai's destructive dragon breath had left a deep impression on him. From then on, he knew that dragon breath was the strongest killing move of the dragon race, and it was so powerful that it could destroy the world. The torch dragon had been severely injured by him and had lost its mind in anger. He was not surprised that it would use a secret technique like dragon breath fire pillars. Facing the dozen or so destructive dragon breath fire pillars that were hundreds of meters long, he did not hesitate to use the seal of mountains and rivers and enter the artifact space. Boom, 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 boom. In the next moment, more than a dozen dragon breath fire pillars slammed into the seal of mountains and rivers. The house-sized golden seal was blasted away on the spot, and it crashed into the sea 10 miles away, falling thousands of meters deep into the sea. A huge whirlpool dozens of miles wide appeared on the surface of the sea, and huge waves thousands of feet high were stirred up. Then, more than a dozen dragon breath fire pillars slammed into the sea, evaporating all the water in a radius of dozens of miles, revealing the dark brown seabed. The dragon breath fire pillars had blasted a dozen or so deep craters in the seabed that was covered with reefs. The cold and hard reefs were burned red by the dragon breath and turned into magma. Such destructive power was truly horrifying and frightening. The soul-level mid-grade seal of mountains and rivers dimmed after being hit by the dragon breath fire pillars, and its power was immediately exhausted. More than a dozen pitch-black craters were left on the surface of the dark golden seal, and it had completely lost the luster of an artifact. Without a doubt, the seal of mountains and rivers had been heavily damaged by the dragon breath fire pillars. Fortunately, artifacts of this grade had the ability to self-recover. It would take about 2 or 3 months for the seal of mountains and rivers to slowly recover. The torch dragon had paid a heavy price after releasing the dragon breath fire pillars. Its strength was rapidly declining, and its essence, energy, and spirit were exhausted and blurry. It was panting heavily. However, it believed that with the destructive might of the dragon breath pillar, it would definitely be able to kill Ji Tianqing. Even if it could not kill Ji Tianqing, it could severely injure him. A moment later, the dragon breath fire pillars gradually dissipated. Seawater surged over from all directions and drowned the magma rapidly, filling up the empty areas and craters. Huge waves surged on the surface of the sea, and the remaining heat and mist dissipated slowly as well. Right then, a dazzling golden light burst out from the bottom of the sea. It was Ji Tianqing's figure, and his entire body was surging with a dazzling divine golden light. Heaven-splitting sword. His voice was loud as a bell, and he roared with a murderous aura. Instantly, he charged in front of the torch dragon and slashed down with all his might with the broken sword. Not only did that slash contain his lifetime of cultivation and attainments in the sword Dao, it was also the strongest move of the unity of heaven and man and sword. At this moment, Ji Tianqing's combat strength erupted to its peak. He released a might and sword intent that could destroy the heavens and the earth, causing even the torch dragon to be shocked and terrified. Chapter 1029. Bam! A deafening explosion erupted, spreading across a radius of 100 miles, shaking the sky and the sea. The 1,000-meter-long torch dragon was struck by the 100-meter-long sword head-on. It was sent flying with blood splattering everywhere. Coincidentally, the sword struck the middle of its two heads. Its body was split into two halves, and the two dragon heads separated, turning into two black dragons. What was even stranger was that its body did not collapse on the spot. Instead, it surged with a monstrous black light that protected itself. Roar! A dragon roar that shook the 9 heavens sounded. After the torch dragon was split into two, it turned into two huge dragons. Its wounds also healed rapidly. It did not hesitate to burn its blood essence and soul, spending 200 years of cultivation to protect its body and suppress its injuries. It glared viciously at Ji Tianqing and memorized his appearance and aura. Then, it turned and flew into the distance. After all, it was severely injured and was at the end of its tether. It only had about 40% of its combat strength left. If it continued to fight, it would definitely not be Ji Tianqing's match. Even if it was not killed, its body would be destroyed. For now, it could only endure the humiliation and anger and escape first. However, how could Ji Tianqing let it escape as it wished? Torch Dragon, you're definitely going to die today. How dare you try to escape? Stop dreaming. Ji Tianqing roared angrily. His body emitted a dazzling golden light as he chased after it with the broken sword. Swoosh! He was as fast as a stream of light. In the blink of an eye, he had flown more than 10 miles and caught up with the fleeing torch dragon. When the torch dragon saw him chasing after it, it was scared out of its wits. It only hesitated for a moment before the two heads and the two halves of its body fled in two different directions. Since it had two heads, now that it was split into two, it was equivalent to having two bodies. Even if Ji Tianqing destroyed one of its bodies, its other body would definitely be able to escape successfully. After recuperating for 100 years, it would be able to return to its peak. Ji Tianqing was also stunned when he saw the two bodies running away in different directions. However, he was only stunned for a moment before he released his sword soul without hesitation. It turned into a 100-meter-long divine golden sword and blasted toward the giant dragon on the left. Sword of Judgment. Although this was still the same sword technique from back then. However, what he used was neither the sword embryo nor the sword heart. Instead, it was the sword soul that was several times stronger. Swish! The giant golden sword transformed from the sword soul instantly pierced through the sky and struck the giant dragon on the left. Boom! With a muffled sound, the giant golden sword accurately struck its head. Instantly, the huge dragon head was blasted into smithereens, exploding into pieces of flesh and blood that blotted out the sky. Half of Torch Dragon's body was destroyed just like that. The dragon's body, which had been severed into several pieces, fell from the sky, mixed with countless pieces of flesh and black blood, and fell into the vast sea. Ji Tianqing didn't have time to search for its dragon crystal and soul crystal, and immediately chased after the giant dragon on the right. At this moment, the giant dragon on the right had already fled 25 miles away. It witnessed the other half of its body being blasted to pieces with its own eyes and was truly terrified. It unleashed all its potential and fled without caring about anything else. Swoosh! It was like a black stream of light, exploding with a speed that was twice as fast as usual as it fled desperately in the sky. Ji Tianqing didn't hesitate either. He summoned his golden sword soul and turned it into a 3-meter-long divine golden sword and flew on it. Swish! He turned into a golden stream of light, streaking across the sky like a shooting star, and chased after the giant dragon relentlessly. The distance between the two parties was rapidly closing. In just a few minutes, Ji Tianqing caught up with the giant black dragon. Sword of Judgment. He activated the golden sword under his feet and turned it into a 100-meter-long divine golden sword. It released a destructive power and stabbed toward the giant dragon ruthlessly. The giant dragon was scared half to death. It desperately twisted its body and changed the direction of its flight, trying to avoid the attack of the Sword of Judgment. However, the Sword of Judgment locked onto its divine soul aura and changed its direction, hitting it with a loud bang. Boom! A dull sound exploded, reverberating in the sky above the sea. This giant dragon was also hit by the Sword of Judgment. Its head exploded on the spot, and its 1,000-meter-long body was also minced into several pieces. Chunks of flesh and blood, mixed with black blood, fell from the sky and fell into the deep sea with a series of plopping sounds. The torch dragon was finally killed. Even if it had extraordinary talent and split its 2 heads and turned into 2 bodies, it still couldn't escape death. Until the moment of its death, it still couldn't believe that Ji Tianqing, who had just broken through to the soul tempering stage, had such terrifying combat strength that he could completely kill it. This was definitely a miracle. An unprecedented miracle. They were both soul tempering stage powerhouses, but who could cross 4 stages and kill an opponent? The torch dragon had lived for thousands of years, but it had never heard of such a thing. It just so happened that it met Ji Tianqing, who used its own life to prove that this miracle had happened. Huff! Ji Tianqing let out a long breath and recalled the sword soul into his mind. In order to kill the torch dragon, he had expended 50% of his strength. He was completely exhausted and had even suffered some minor injuries. After all, the torch dragon was not an ordinary soul-tempering stage powerhouse. It was also a dragon with outstanding combat strength. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky, panting silently for a while before diving into the deep sea to search for spoils of war. He found the torch dragon's corpse and dug out half a soul crystal, a dragon crystal, and many dragon bones from the corpse. After putting these materials into his spatial ring, he flew back to the sea and dived into the deep sea to continue his search. Not long after, he found another half a soul crystal and many dragon bones. I didn't expect this torch dragon to be so unique. It had 2 heads and could actually split the soul crystal into 2 and store it in 2 heads. Ji Tianqing sighed in amazement as he sorted out the spoils of war. Those dragon bones were precious materials for refining weapons and medicine. He stored them in his spatial ring to sell or use in the future. As for the dragon crystal, he wanted to give it to the little black dragon so that it could devour and refine the dragon crystal to quickly increase its strength. As for the 2 soul crystal fragments of the torch dragon, he used the black hole in his palm to devour them and use them to recover the energy of the burial of heaven. After arranging the spoils of war, he flew back to the island that had turned into ruins. He burrowed deep into the ground and hid to recuperate and recover his strength. He consumed a few spirit pills and more than 10 spirit stones to recuperate for 2 days. His injuries were 80% healed, and his strength was restored to its peak. On the morning of the 3rd day, he finished recuperating and prepared to leave the island. At this moment, the deep and powerful voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind. Tianqing, you can't leave the sinkhole yet. There's something more important that you have to do as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing was stunned and asked with joy, Burial of heaven, weren't you heavily injured and in a deep sleep? Chapter 1030. Burial of Heaven responded. That's right. I managed to recover some of my vitality after consuming those soul crystals and fey cores. The soul crystal you gave me just now has even more powerful soul energy. After I consume it, I can recover nearly 20% of my vitality. Ji Tianqing knew that it was talking about the torch dragon's soul crystal. Burial of heaven, you said that I can't leave yet because there's something more important I need to do as soon as possible. What is it? Burial of heaven said in a low and serious voice. You've already obtained the illusory feather ice gold and the boundless stone. These two materials are top-notch refining materials. With my current strength, I'm still unable to smelt these two materials to repair the broken sword and increase its power. However, I know that in the northwest of the Eastern Sea's sinkhole, there's a magical sun-moon furnace. It's a divine artifact of heaven and earth. You have to find the sun-moon furnace as soon as possible and use it to smelt these two materials to repair the broken sword and increase its power. Sun-moon smelting furnace? Ji Tianqing frowned in confusion, unable to make heads or tails of it. Burial of Heaven, what's that? Is it a dangerous place or a divine artifact? Burial of Heaven said in a deep voice. It's a rare sight in the world and also a divine artifact of heaven and earth. You just have to search in the northwest of the sinkhole. It's very unique. When you see it, you'll definitely recognize it. With that, Burial of Heaven did not say anything else. It went back to sleep and consumed the torch dragon's soul crystal. Ji Tianqing did not ask any more questions. He hurriedly left the island and flew towards the northwest. While he was flying, he was secretly calculating in his heart. I wonder what the sun-moon furnace that Burial of Heaven mentioned is? I hope I can find it as soon as possible to repair the broken sword and increase its power. This way, when I enter the northern desert, I'll be able to fight with greater strength. Only then will I have a better chance of saving Yao Yao. Time passed quickly as the sun and moon alternated. Unknowingly, 24 days passed. Ji Tianqing flew continuously for over 20 days before he finally entered the northwest of the sinkhole. In these 20-odd days, he had traversed more than 1,000,000 miles of sea, flying over countless islands and giant reefs. Of course, he had also experienced countless dangers. Many times, he had been besieged by powerful demonic beasts and sea beasts. The sea demon behemoths that lived in the East Sea's sinkhole were at least at the divine essence realm. Those that could occupy a region as their territory were all at the soul refinement realm. Naturally, the giant sea monsters that attacked him were all in the spirit refinement realm. Luckily, most of the sea demons were below the 5th level of the soul refining realm. Whenever he tried his best and used all his trump cards and ultimate skills, he was always able to kill those giant sea monsters and turn the situation around. After killing the sea demon beasts, he would plunder the soul crystals, monster cores, and other items for the Burial of Heaven to recover. However, he had also encountered several powerful 5th and 6th level soul refinement stage demonic beasts. Of course, he couldn't defeat such a terrifying giant sea monster. He was badly wounded by the giant sea monster and could only run away in a sorry state. There were even a few times where he almost lost his life. But in the end, he gritted his teeth and pulled through. He shook off the giant sea monsters that were chasing him and escaped danger. At this moment, the sun was setting in the west. He stood on the vast azure sea, and he was already mentally exhausted and covered in dust. The white robe he wore had long since become tattered and covered in bloodstains. His previous experience and encounters made him believe that what Miracle Dr. Bailey, Divine Master Blackfeather, Yun Zhongqi, and the others said was absolutely true. The East Sea's sinkhole was indeed the most dangerous forbidden land in the world. Even a soul refinement stage powerhouse wouldn't dare to barge in recklessly. The slightest carelessness could cost him his life. He looked around the sea and muttered softly, "Now that I'm mentally exhausted and weak, I have to find a place to rest for a day before continuing to search for the sun-moon furnace." After making up his mind, he continued to fly in the northwest direction, searching for an island that he could land on. About 2 hours later, he had flown for more than 4,000 miles. Finally, he saw a huge black shadow on the sea in front of him. Although it was very far away, he could vaguely make out that it was a gigantic island that floated in the sky 1,000 feet high. Above the island was a sky covered by thin clouds while below was the vast blue sea. The island floated silently in the sky without moving at all, as though it was rooted. Ji Tianqing frowned and muttered in confusion, "How can such a gigantic island float in the sky? Am I seeing things?" He sped up and flew forward, approaching the floating island rapidly. Before long, he arrived near the gigantic island. At this moment, he realized that he wasn't seeing things. It was truly an island with a radius of 150 kilometers that floated in the sky. The island was surrounded by reefs and green forests, and grass grew on the island. There were even flocks of seabirds and all sorts of strange-looking birds and beasts. Although this scene seemed very mysterious, as if it was a scene from a dream. But all of this was real. Ji Tianqing flew around the island and carefully observed it for an hour, but he couldn't find any clues. He couldn't figure out how the island could float in the sky. He used his spiritual energy to investigate and found that there was no array on the island. There was also no powerful force in the sea that supported the island. This is really strange. Without the support of an array and the power of heaven and earth, how can the island float in the sky? Can an island that floats in the sky still be called an island? It should be called a floating island, right? Ji Tianqing was filled with doubts and expectations. He landed on the gigantic floating island and looked around. The birds and beasts that lived on the island weren't very strong. There were no spirit refinement realm overlords. When he approached, the birds and beasts were all frightened and fled in all directions, fleeing far away. 2 hours later, he confirmed that there was no danger on the floating island. He hid in a secluded place and began to recuperate. The sun quickly set in the sky and night fell. In the middle of the night, Ji Tianqing was immersed in cultivation. He was recuperating from his injuries and recovering his true essence and soul. However, he didn't realize that the gigantic floating island was actually moving silently. The floating island didn't tremble or shake at all. It flew quickly in the night sky and flew deeper into the ultimate. It was very fast, but it didn't bring about any strong winds or make any sound. The birds and beasts on the island didn't seem to notice, or perhaps they were already used to such strange changes. Ji Tianqing was immersed in cultivation and didn't notice the abnormality of the floating island. Several hours later, the sky finally brightened. When the first glimmer of dawn appeared on the horizon, the flying island actually gradually came to a stop. Then, the floating island stopped in the sky above the vast sea and stopped moving. Ji Tianqing recuperated for an entire night. His injuries and cultivation had mostly recovered. He ended his cultivation and flew to the sky above the island, preparing to leave. Chapter 1031. Ji Tianqing's eyesight and observation skills had reached the level of minute detail. Although the floating island was still surrounded by the blue sea, he could tell at a glance that this was definitely not the sea from yesterday. I didn't leave the floating island last night, but now the floating island has appeared in another sea? Could it be that the floating island flew away on its own last night? This absurd thought popped up in his mind. He found it inconceivable and unbelievable. However, other than this, he could not find any other reason to explain the changes before him. Forget it. Regardless of what's going on with this floating island, this place is not good. I can't stay here for long. He hurriedly left the floating island and flew northwest. However, he had only flown 2,000 miles when he saw another huge floating island in the sky ahead of him. Another floating island has appeared? This sea is too strange. No wonder Tai had such a strong reaction when I wanted to come to the sinkhole. Ji Tianqing flew past the giant floating island. Thinking back to what Tai had said to him, he gradually let go of it. Tai had once said that the East Sea's sinkhole was not only the most dangerous forbidden land in the world, but also the most unique wonder. In the East Sea's sinkhole, there were all sorts of unimaginable and inconceivable scenes. There were mountains hanging in the sky, seawater pouring into the sky, the sun sinking to the bottom of the sea, the moon reflecting the day. In short, the East Sea sinkhole was a forbidden land where yin and yang were in chaos and heaven and earth were inverted. When Ji Tianqing heard it, he only thought that it was a rumor and exaggeration. He did not take it to heart. Now that he had been in the sinkhole for more than a month, he had personally experienced many dangers and seen many wonders. He finally believed Tai's words and was no longer so curious about the strange floating island in front of him. He continued to fly towards the northwest. Not long after, he saw many more floating islands floating in the sky, motionless. Within a radius of tens of thousands of miles, there were dozens of huge floating islands. A day passed quickly. That night, as he hurried through the sky, he saw a huge floating island with his own eyes. It flew silently in the night sky. The floating island's flying speed was comparable to a half-step soul refinement realm expert, and it did not make any sound. Seeing this strange scene, he finally confirmed his conjecture. The next morning, he left the sea region filled with floating islands and entered another sea region. There were no floating islands in the sky above this ocean, but there were many huge reefs and thousands of meters tall mountains scattered about. Those towering mountains quietly floated high in the sky, towering in the thin clouds and thick fog, as if they were immortal mountains in the heavens. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing had seen the floating island before and was mentally prepared. He wasn't too surprised to see such a strange scene. If an ordinary person were to come here, they would probably be shocked to the point of incoherence. Originally, he wanted to fly to the floating mountain peaks to enjoy the scenery and investigate the situation within the mountain peaks. However, there were at least 3 to 5 spirit refinement realm beasts occupying each of the floating mountains. He didn't want to waste time fighting with those spirit refinement realm giant beasts. Therefore, he chose to circle around those floating mountains and continue flying deeper into the sinkhole. 2 days passed quickly. He left the floating mountain region and entered a new sea region. This sea region was relatively calm. He flew continuously for 20,000 kilometers and didn't encounter any strange scenes. Until, at noon, when he was flying in the sky, he suddenly saw 2 huge black shadows appear on the surface of the sea ahead. Those were 2 towering mountain peaks that were 10,000 meters tall. They towered on the surface of the sea, seemingly supporting the sky. Of course, those 2 mountain peaks were submerged by the sea and were not floating in the air. Ji Tianqing increased his speed and flew over. When he got close, he saw a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. He saw that the parts of the 2 mountain peaks that were exposed above the sea both reached 10,000 meters tall. The mountains were as black as ink, and not a single blade of grass grew. They were covered in traces of wind, frost, and the erosion of time. The 2 mountain peaks were separated by 50 kilometers. This sea region with a radius of 50 kilometers was actually an incomparably huge vortex. In the deepest part of the vortex, a golden blazing sun could be clearly seen lying quietly at the bottom of the sea, emitting a dazzling golden light. The seawater in all directions converged into dozens of huge blue water pillars that actually flew into the sky and poured into the 2 mountain peaks. At the top of the 2 mountain peaks, there was a lake that was filled with blue seawater. Endless seawater poured down from the sky, forming 2 majestic waterfalls that were 10,000 meters tall that poured into the vortex between the 2 mountains. Such a huge and spectacular waterfall, dozens of water pillars that flew into the sky, and the blazing sun that sank to the bottom of the sea. Ji Tianqing was filled with shock and amazement. The strange scenes that Tai described have all come true. Indeed, there are mountains hanging in the sky, seawater pouring into the sky, and the sun sinking to the bottom of the sea. Such an inconceivable scene is simply the masterpiece of the Creator. It's like a miracle created by the gods themselves. Truly incredible. Ji Tianqing stood in the air between the 2 mountains and looked down at the abyss vortex below. He stared at the blazing sun that sank to the bottom of the sea and murmured with amazement. How can the blazing sun sink to the bottom of the sea? Could it be the reflection of the seawater? He was filled with doubts. He subconsciously looked up at the sky and found that it was covered by thin clouds. Although it was daytime, there was a golden sun hanging high in the sky, but the sunlight was blocked by the thin clouds. No matter what, it was impossible for the golden sun to be reflected at the bottom of the sea. He couldn't help but suspect that the golden sun in the depths of the vortex must contain some mysteries and mysteries. Thinking of this, his body trembled as he suddenly remembered what the burial of heaven had said before. I understand now. Could this be the sun-moon furnace that the burial of heaven mentioned? He looked down at the vortex from the sky. He looked at the golden sun. It was indeed like a huge furnace that was spewing out golden flames. If one looked down at the 2 mountain peaks, the giant vortex, and the golden sun from the perspective of a peerless master, it really did look like a blazing sun furnace. However, the burial of heaven asked me to look for the sun-moon furnace. This strange scene only has a blazing sun. Where did the moon come from? This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind as he looked around in confusion. When he looked up at the peaks of the 2 mountain peaks, he suddenly thought of something and hurriedly flew to the peak. He saw that there was a huge lake at the top of the 2 mountain peaks. In the clear light blue lake, there was a clear reflection of the bright moon. It was noon, so there was no moon in the sky. However, 2 bright moons could clearly be seen in the lakes at the 2 mountain peaks. This was definitely a strange scene, a miracle. Chapter 1032. Ji Tianqing could not understand. Why would the sun sink to the bottom of the sea and the moon shine on the peak of the mountain? How exactly did such a beautiful and miraculous landscape come into being? However, he was just thinking about it. He would not get to the bottom of it. He only needed to know that this was the sun-moon furnace he was looking for. That was enough. Burial of Heaven. I have found the sun-moon furnace. He called out to Burial of Heaven in his mind and used his soul to send a message to Burial of Heaven. After a while, Burial of Heaven woke up from its slumber and said with a gratified tone, "Very good. This is the sun-moon furnace, the divine artifact of heaven and earth. Now, we can finally use the divine power of heaven and earth to smelt the illusory feather ice gold and boundless stone to repair the broken sword and increase its power." Ji Tianqing also looked gratified and expectant. He asked, "Burial of Heaven, after we use the sun-moon furnace to repair the broken sword, will the broken sword be restored and become a complete divine sword?" Burial of Heaven said with a complicated tone, "With just these two materials, how can the broken sword be restored to its original state? Even after the sun-moon furnace is used to repair the broken sword, it will still be a broken sword. However, the quality, grade and power of the broken sword will increase by leaps and bounds. According to my estimation, the broken sword will be able to recover 10% of its power and be comparable to a high-grade soul-level magic treasure." Hearing its words, Ji Tianqing quickly nodded and showed an expectant expression. "That is great. Burial of Heaven. When do we start?" "Now is the right time," Burial of Heaven said in a deep and vigorous voice. "The sun-moon furnace at noon is the most powerful and can quickly smelt the illusory feather ice gold and boundless stone. Tianqing, take out those two materials and guard here. I will enter the sun-moon furnace alone to smelt the materials and repair the sword. Remember, every day at noon and midnight, you will circulate the Crimson Sun Primordial Fire and Extreme Een Frigid Fire respectively and pour them into the sun-moon furnace for 2 hours." After Burial of Heaven finished explaining, Ji Tianqing took out the broken sword, illusory feather ice gold and boundless stone. Shwa! The pitch-black broken sword glowed with a mysterious and cold black light. It enveloped the illusory feather ice gold and the boundless stone and flew toward the sun-moon furnace below. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and watched with his own eyes as the Burial of Heaven carried the two materials through the abyss-like vortex and into the bright golden sun. In the blink of an eye, the broken sword and the two materials disappeared, swallowed by the bright golden light. Only then did Ji Tianqing regain his composure. He slowly raised both of his palms and began to channel the scarlet yang real fire. His whole body was surging with a powerful aura, and there was a turbulent true essence surging in his body. Between his palms, endless red flames were released, pouring down towards the vortex below. Shwa! 2 huge pillars of fire descended from the sky and poured into the vortex, pouring into the golden sun. Instantly, the power of the sun-moon furnace was activated. The scorching sun emitted a dazzling golden light, which rapidly expanded to a radius of 100 miles, illuminating the entire vortex with golden light. On top of the 2 mountains, in the clear lake, 2 bright and flawless moons also lit up with silvery white moonlight. Ji Tianqing could clearly feel the earth-shaking power released from the vortex. It was incomparably violent and unbelievably powerful. The violent and scorching invisible air currents overflowed, instantly evaporating the endless seawater, turning it into a vast mist that surged into the sky. Ji Tianqing was enveloped by the vast mist, enduring the impact of the invisible force. He could barely stand, and his whole body trembled. What a powerful force! I'm standing in the sky, so far away from the center of the vortex, but the residual power released by the sun-moon furnace is still so strong. One can imagine that the power of the sun-moon furnace is really destructive and can burn everything. This time, he truly felt the power of heaven and earth, and experienced the terrifying power of a divine artifact of heaven and earth. He didn't doubt that if he entered the sun-moon furnace, no matter how strong he was, or how powerful his magical treasures were, he would be melted into dregs. Even a mid-grade soul-level magical treasure would be melted into molten iron in the sun-moon furnace. He tried his best to hold on, using his true essence to form a shield to protect himself from the impact of the invisible force and air waves. He continued to inject the scarlet sun real fire into the sun-moon furnace, which consumed a lot of his true essence. His mind was also somewhat tired. Fortunately, 2 hours were not considered long, and it passed quickly. After 2 hours, he stopped casting and slowly withdrew his palms. Phew! He let out a long breath of turbid air, staring at the scorching sun under the vortex. He prayed silently in his heart, Burial of Heaven, I hope everything goes well for you." Unfortunately, Burial of Heaven was in the sun-moon furnace, using all his strength to smelt the sword and the two materials, so he couldn't hear his voice at all. After panting for a moment, Ji Tianqing took out 2 elixirs and swallowed them, silently circulating his true essence to recover. He sat in the sky between the 2 mountains, circulating his true essence to recover his strength. At the same time, he was guarding Burial of Heaven, constantly paying attention to the movements in all directions. More than 4 hours later, the curtain of night fell. 10 hours later, it was midnight again. In the gloomy night sky, a bright moon hung high in the sky. At this moment, the sun-moon furnace had undergone a subtle change. The golden sun at the bottom of the vortex had shrunk to its normal size, and its light had become restrained and calm. In the lake at the top of the 2 mountains, the 2 bright moons had become incomparably huge, bright and dazzling. The bright and flawless moonlight illuminated the night sky with a blazing white. Ji Tianqing followed Burial of Heaven's instructions and hurriedly used the extreme frost fire. His palms released 2 gray pillars of fire, pouring them into the sun-moon furnace. He immediately felt that the power of the sun-moon furnace had also undergone a change. The invisible power that overflowed from the vortex was actually ice-cold. He was startled for a moment, but immediately realized that the change in power of the sun-moon furnace contained the profundity of the great Tao of heaven and earth. I understand now. The sun is yang, and the moon is yin. Every day, the sun and moon will alternate, and the sun-moon furnace will alternate between yin and yang every day. Burial of Heaven wants to refine the divine sword and smelt the materials. Not only does it need the help of the yang fire of heaven and earth, it also needs the help of the yin fire of heaven and earth. The combination of yin and yang is the great Tao of heaven and earth, and only then can a true divine weapon be forged. After comprehending all this, Ji Tianqing was even more shocked by the miraculous effects of the sun-moon furnace. He was also full of anticipation for the power of the refined broken sword. Unknowingly, a new day had arrived. At noon on the 2nd day, he used the scarlet sun primordial fire and poured it into the sun-moon furnace. At midnight, he continued to use the extreme frost fire and poured it into the vortex. Day after day passed. Every day, he would pour primordial fire and frost fire into the sun-moon furnace. The rest of the time, he would cultivate and recover his true essence. Just like that, 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. At noon on the 10th day, the blazing sun in the sun-moon furnace blossomed with golden light that was 10 times more dazzling than before. Swoosh! Following the sound of something breaking through the air, an incomparably huge ancient sword wrapped in sacred golden light flew out of the sun-moon furnace. Chapter 1033. When the divine sword was born, a gigantic golden sword shadow tore through the sky and soared into the sky. The area within a 100-mile radius was shrouded in a dazzling golden light. Heaven and earth were filled with violent sword aura and a divine aura that looked down on the universe. Once the divine sword appeared, who could compete with it? Even the sun and moon were overshadowed by the divine sword's radiance and became dim. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and watched the divine sword fly into the sky excitedly. He clenched his fists excitedly and expectantly. This is great! The Burial of Heaven is finally finished tempering. These 10 days of hard work and perseverance are all worth it. In these 10 days, he had been casting spells day and night, using the extreme yang primordial fire and extreme yin frigid fire to help the sun-moon furnace temper the divine sword. Now, he was already mentally and physically exhausted. He had used up a lot of his true essence and was a little dispirited. However, when he saw the divine sword being born and the earth-shattering scene of divine light, he was extremely gratified. He felt that all his hard work was worth it. After a long time, the divine golden light that covered the sky gradually dissipated. The sun-moon furnace also gradually calmed down. The golden flames and the silver moonlight also gradually disappeared. Swoosh! The divine sword flew back from the sky and returned to Ji Tianqing. On the surface, the divine sword looked like a broken sword like before. However, although the sword was broken, it was not broken or old. The mottled rust and cracks on the sword had all been repaired. It was now shiny and cold. The cracks on the blade were also repaired. There was a faint flowing light on the blade, which contained a sharp aura that could cut through heaven and earth. Of course, the broken sword still had an ancient aura, gloomy and weathered. Ji Tianqing reached out and grabbed the sword hilt. With a casual wave, the divine sword let out a trembling hum and shot out an extremely sharp sword aura. The sword aura was shapeless and formless. It instantly slashed into the sea below. Bam! A 1,000-meter-long gully appeared on the calm surface of the sea, revealing the seabed that was covered with sand and creating huge waves that were 100 meters tall. The power of the sword aura was so shocking that it made Ji Tianqing frown. His eyes were filled with shock. Such formidable might is absolutely not something a high-grade soul-rank magic treasure can compare to. As soon as he said that, the voice of the burial of heaven came from the broken sword. That's right. The effects of these 10 days of tempering and recovery were better than I had expected. The strength of the broken sword is comparable to a supreme-grade soul-level Dharma treasure. Its material is very close to an essence soul-level Dharma treasure. Hearing its words, Ji Tianqing immediately showed a gratified expression and nodded. I see. No wonder I feel that the power of the broken sword has increased by 7 or 8 times. He held the broken sword in his hand and looked at it with shining eyes. His tone was somewhat emotional as he said, after spending half a year and traveling across half the continent, I have finally achieved my goal. Burial of Heaven. I'm leaving the ultimate for the northern desert. Burial of Heaven pondered for a moment before saying in a deep voice, Tianqing, leaving the sinkhole isn't a problem, but you can't head to the northern desert immediately. You've just broken through to the soul cultivation stage and your martial arts foundation is not stable enough. You haven't condensed the divine soul Dharma I and you haven't cultivated the sword soul Tao. You've already waited for half a year. It doesn't matter if you delay for another 10 days or half a month. I hope you can cultivate the sword soul Tao and condense the divine soul Dharma I first. Burial of Heaven's words were very pertinent. After Ji Tianqing heard it, he pondered for a moment and nodded in agreement. Good. Sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting wood. I'll find a place to cultivate the sword soul Tao and condense the divine soul Dharma I first. When I'm stronger, I'll head to the northern desert. Only then will I have a better chance of rescuing Yao Yao. He made up his mind and prepared to find a place to cultivate in seclusion. Burial of Heaven reminded him in a timely manner, there's no need to go elsewhere. Cultivate here. With the help of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered by the sun-moon furnace, you'll be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. Ji Tianqing looked at the whirlpool under his feet and then at the peak of the mountain on his left. He flew toward the peak of the mountain. He landed on the peak of the mountain and set up 2 defensive formations by the lake. Then he sat on a large blue stone and began to cultivate in seclusion. His divine soul passed through the pitch-black whirlpool in his dantian and entered Kenshin's tomb. Swoosh! With a flash of brilliance, the golden sword of divine soul entered the gray and cold space and transformed into his appearance. He flew over the gray and cold wilderness and arrived near the 18 tombstones. Since Burial of Heaven returned to the divine sword, the heaven-reaching sword steel that was thousands of feet tall had disappeared. Now, there were only 18 pitch-black and cold tombstones left on the wilderness. The 9 tombstones on the left were empty. The records of the sword heart Tao had long disappeared. He looked at the 9 tombstones on the right and saw a few lines of ancient seal characters engraved on the first tombstone. There were only a few hundred words, but they were mysterious and extraordinarily profound. They recorded the first level of the sword soul Tao. The other 8 tombstones were empty. He had to cultivate the first level of the sword soul Tao before he could see the following mnemonics. Ji Tianqing had already understood this point. He ignored the other 8 tombstones and stared at the ancient characters on the first tombstone. He carefully read the first level of the sword soul Tao. About an hour later, he had memorized the mnemonics of the sword soul Tao. He could recite them backwards. Then, his divine soul left Kenshin's tomb and returned to his body. He began to comprehend the mnemonics of the sword soul Tao. With his talent and comprehension, it would take him about a month to gradually comprehend the first level of the sword soul Tao. However, Burial of Heaven took the initiative to explain the sword soul Tao to him. It dissected the mnemonics of the sword soul Tao for him so that he could quickly comprehend the essence and profound meaning of the sword soul Tao. Tianqing, the sword heart Tao that you cultivated in the past is a martial Tao that cultivates the body and the sword. When you cultivate it to perfection, you can reach the realm of having no sword in your hand and the sword in your heart. This is the limit of the mortal martial Tao. Your attainments in sword techniques in the martial Tao world can be called a Grand Master of the sword Tao. However, the sword soul Tao is an even more profound and mysterious soul Tao. It has already surpassed the mortal martial Tao. This is the realm between the martial Tao and the divine Tao. It focuses on refining the soul. The Sword Soul Tao is not only about using the soul to condense the sword, but also about using the soul to control the sword. It integrates the profound meaning of the Sword Tao into the soul. If you can cultivate the Sword Soul Tao and reach perfection, you can turn everything in the world into a sword. All the power in the world can be used by you. At that time, you will become the #1 person under the divine Tao. Your sword soul will be immortal and indestructible. Your sword will travel through the void and roam the galaxy. After listening to Burial of Heaven's explanation, Ji Tianqing had a deeper understanding of the Sword Soul Tao. His heart was filled with shock and yearning. He vaguely felt that the Sword Soul Tao was not only an even more profound and unfathomable Sword Tao, but also a soul-refining Tao that had never existed since ancient times. Once he cultivated the Sword Soul Tao, he would definitely shock the world and be invincible. He would have the terrifying power to control 10,000 swords and shatter the galaxy. Filled with anticipation and longing, he began to cultivate in seclusion. Chapter 1034. The Sun-Moon Furnace was a divine artifact of the heavens and earth, gathering the spiritual energy of the heavens and earth within a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers. Ji Tianqing sat by the side of the moon reflection lake at the peak of the mountain, cultivating bitterly day and night in seclusion, continuously absorbing vast amounts of spiritual energy. As time passed, his strength continued to increase, and so did the strength of his spirit. After a full 8 days, he finally mastered the first level of the Sword Soul Tao, officially establishing the foundation of the Sword Soul Tao. Although he had long reached the soul refinement realm, he had only truly stepped into the Sword Soul Tao now. A door to a higher world of the Sword Tao was opened by him. On the morning of the 9th day, Ji Tianqing stopped cultivating the Sword Soul Tao. With the help of the divine sword, he began to circulate the strength of his spirit, attempting to condense a soul Dharma I. On this continent, all transcendents who had reached the soul refinement realm would condense a soul Dharma I. This was the symbol of a soul refinement realm expert, and the number of soul Dharma Is one possessed represented the corresponding level of strength. Furthermore, the soul Dharma I was also a great source of strength for a soul refinement realm expert. With the soul Dharma I, a soul refinement realm expert could see through the mysteries of the heavens and earth, control the strength of his spirit even more meticulously, and even execute a soul domain. All in all, only those who had condensed a soul Dharma I could be considered a true soul refinement realm expert. Ji Tianqing was no exception. He had to condense a soul Dharma I as soon as possible. Only then could he be considered to have officially reached the first level of the soul refinement realm. Lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, only truth can guide me, soul Dharma I can break through the void. He sat cross-legged on the green rock, reciting a strange and obscure incantation in his mind. Not long ago, he had obtained the heavenly observation record in the Eastern Mountain residence. This was an incantation he had seen in the book, The Cultivation Insights of the Eastern Mountain Exalt. It could help him condense a soul Dharma I. Following the guidance of the incantation and the cultivation experiences of the Eastern Mountain Exalt, he continuously circulated the strength of his spirit sword, wanting to condense a soul Dharma I. He was exceptionally focused on his cultivation, even forgetting the passage of time. Unknowingly, 5 days had passed. Not only had Ji Tianqing failed to condense a soul Dharma I, he hadn't even managed to condense a soul Dharma I's embryonic form. He had no choice but to stop cultivating, frowning, his brows furrowed, pondering over in night, with a grave expression on his face. How could this be? It's been 5 days, but I haven't even comprehended a trace of the true essence of divine soul Dharma Is? This was completely impossible. With my innate talent and comprehension ability, coupled with the Eastern Mountain Exalt's insights on cultivation and the help of the broken sword, as well as the fact that I've cultivated the pure heart Dharma I. Logically speaking, I should be able to condense the divine soul Dharma I very soon. Just as he was racking his brains but was still puzzled, the voice of the Burial of Heaven came from the broken sword. Tianqing, using the cultivation experience of our predecessors to reach your goal faster is indeed a shortcut to increasing your strength. But you are different. The Sword Heart Tao and Sword Soul Tao that you cultivate are unique in this world. Condensing the Dharma Is of the Divine Soul is related to your future cultivation of the Divine Soul and the Tao of Sword Soul. In this matter, you cannot borrow the experience of others. You must rely on your own comprehension and find your own Tao of the Soul. Hearing Burial of Heaven's reminder, Ji Tianqing immediately guessed the reason and understood his direction. That's right. Although the Eastern Mountain Exalt was an unparalleled exalt from 10,000 years ago, his cultivation method and martial Tao were completely different from mine. I can use some of his cultivation experience as a reference and learn from him, but condensing the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul is something that I can only fumble about on my own. Having found the source of his failure, Ji Tianqing abandoned the Eastern Mountain Exalt's cultivation experience and began to fumble and comprehend on his own. He possessed the lightning spirit eyes and had cultivated the pure heart Dharma eye before. He had his own comprehension and thoughts on condensing the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul. Following his own thoughts, he continued to attempt to condense the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul. This way it was indeed effective. He had only cultivated for around 4 days and had already touched the threshold of the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul, condensing its embryonic form. Even though his Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul looked a little awkward, just like an oval-shaped Dharma eye. But this was the first step to success. He persevered and continued to condense it, only wanting to succeed in condensing the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul as soon as possible. Unknowingly, another 10 days passed. His Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul had already been condensed by more than half, becoming solid. It was only now that he discovered that his Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul were becoming more and more strange, actually becoming even more oval and narrow. Half a month later, he finally succeeded in condensing the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul. However, when he saw the appearance of the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul, he was stunned on the spot. Why is my Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul like this? It's actually not a Dharma eye, but a sword. That's right. His Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul was not a white eyeball, but a blazing white sword of light that was 3 feet long. This sword of light was condensed from the power of the Divine Soul. It was blazing white and dazzling all over, containing an incomparably sharp might. Ji Tianqing controlled the blazing white sword of light to fly before him, carefully sizing it up as he murmured with a rather strange expression. Looks like the sword soul Tao that I cultivate has determined that I am unable to condense the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul, and can only condense the Dharma sword of the Divine Soul. He attempted to control the Dharma sword of the Divine Soul, speeding through the skies. Swish, swish, swish. The speed of the Dharma sword of the Divine Soul was as fast as the aurora, graceful and graceful. It flickered and flashed through the skies, leaving streaks of white marks in the sky. After repeated trials and experiments, Ji Tianqing finally confirmed that this Dharma sword of the Divine Soul had all the functions of the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul. He could control the Dharma sword of the Divine Soul, and freely use sword techniques within a radius of 10 miles to assassinate his enemies. Moreover, the Dharma sword of the Divine Soul could also release the power of the Divine Soul to monitor a radius of 10 miles. Ji Tianqing was satisfied as he withdrew the Dharma sword of the Divine Soul. The Dharma sword of the Divine Soul floated in the air behind him, flashing with white light and accumulating a soaring sword intent. All the soul-tempering powerhouses in the world have condensed the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul. Only I have condensed the Dharma sword of the Divine Soul. In this way, I can be considered a unique soul-tempering powerhouse in the world. Right now, I am only at the first level of the soul-tempering realm and can only condense one Dharma sword of the Divine Soul. If I reach the 9th level of the soul-tempering realm and condense 9 Dharma swords of the Divine Soul, how powerful would I be? Using the soul to control the sword, no one can rival me. With 9 swords of the Divine Soul, I can destroy the heavens and earth. Thinking of this, a strong sense of anticipation and yearning grew in his heart. The voice of the burial of heaven also sounded in his mind. It said in a gratified tone, "Tianqing, you have inherited Kenshin's legacy. Your martial Tao is different and is destined to be unique. Others condense the Divine Soul, but you condense the Sword Soul. Others condense the Dharma eyes of the Divine Soul, but you condense the Dharma sword of the Divine Soul. Your special talent and unparalleled sword Tao will allow you to have the combat strength to crush powerhouses of the same realm. Now you can leave the sinkhole and head to the northern desert to carry out your plan." After hearing the words of the burial of heaven, Ji Tianqing nodded. Chapter 1035. With the Soul Magic Sword, Ji Tianqing could travel at a much faster speed. If he used his wings to fly, it would take him about 2 months to leave the East Sea and reach the border of the northern desert. But with the Soul Magic Sword, he would only need half a month to reach the border. Of course, the flying speed of the Soul Magic Sword was much slower than that of the Sword Soul. But the sword soul was the source of his soul and power. It could only be used for a short period of time to escape or chase after enemies. It could not be used for traveling. The soul magic sword was the most suitable for traveling. He stepped on the 3-meter-long soul magic sword and turned into a dazzling white light as he flew across the sky at lightning speed. In just 2 days, he left the East Sea and the bottomless abyss. During this time, he encountered many demons and giant beasts in the soul-tempering realm and was surrounded and attacked many times. But he did not care about those demons and sea beasts. He rode the soul magic sword and flew away in a carefree manner. No matter how strong those demons and giant beasts were, they could not catch up with him. They could only watch him leave. He was not in any danger along the way. After flying for half a month, he finally reached the border between the East Sea and the northern desert. It was noon and the sun was shining brightly. In the azure blue sea, the waves surged and glowed with golden light. 300 miles ahead, there was a dark horizon at the end of the sky. That was the border of the northern desert. Ji Tianqing slowed down his flying speed and stopped in the sky above the vast sea. He frowned and looked down at the scene below. There was an island in the sea below. The island was hundreds of miles wide and was covered with green grass and forests. There were also tens of thousands of soldiers from the water tribe stationed there. A powerful defensive formation protected the entire island. There were 2 camps on the island. There were thousands of military tents in the camp. Banners were flying around the camp. The atmosphere was solemn and stern. At this moment, teams of soldiers from the water tribe rushed out of the sea and landed on the island. They carried many severely injured water tribe members. After landing on the island, they rushed to the camp as fast as the wind. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing frowned and a look of confusion flashed across his eyes. The army of the water tribe is not hiding in the depths of the sea. Why are they stationed on this island? From the looks of it, they seem to be fighting a great battle? His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, using his divine soul power to detect the movements in the sea. Soon, he discovered that the seemingly vast blue sea was mixed with a large amount of blood. In addition to the salty smell of seawater, there was also the smell of blood in the air. There really is a war. Ji Tianqing immediately had an answer. He mumbled to himself. Tai said that something big had happened at the East Sea border and that he had to come personally to oversee the situation. At that time, I asked him if it had anything to do with the demons, but he didn't answer. Now it seems that this matter definitely has something to do with the demon race. At this moment, he saw huge waves suddenly surging on the surface of the sea 50 miles ahead of him, and a dull rumbling sound could be heard. The surging and churning waves were mixed with light red blood and contained a violent origin energy aura. Ji Tianqing knew at a glance that there must be people fighting at the bottom of the sea to cause such a commotion. He hurriedly flew to the surface of the sea and released his divine soul power into the vast sea to investigate the situation at the bottom of the sea. This place was near the border between the East Sea and the northern desert. It was a shallow sea area, and the sea was only 1,000 meters deep. His divine soul power reached the bottom of the sea and immediately saw the situation at the bottom of the sea. As he expected, there were hundreds of people fighting fiercely at the bottom of the sea in the dim light. One group of people was the water tribe soldiers. They were all shrimp soldiers and crab generals holding swords, spears, swords, and halberds. They were only in the mystic comprehending realm, and there were more than 300 of them. The other group of people were all 3 meters tall, and their bodies were completely black and purple. They looked ferocious and ferocious. Although there were only about 100 of them, they were all wearing armor and holding spears and large swords. They ferociously charged at the formation of the water tribe soldiers. Logically speaking, the bottom of the sea was the main battlefield of the water tribe soldiers. They had the advantage in numbers and should be able to defeat the demon soldiers. However, the reality was the exact opposite. Those demon soldiers were incomparably ferocious. They crazily charged and broke the formation of the water tribe soldiers. The water tribe soldiers retreated pathetically. In a short span of a dozen breaths, more than 30 water tribe soldiers were slaughtered by the demon soldiers. Their corpses were chopped into pieces, and blood gushed out. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing instantly frowned, and was even more puzzled. As expected, the demon race has invaded the East Sea and is attacking the water tribe. For thousands of years, the demon race has been wreaking havoc on the continent, harming both the human and demon races. However, the demon race has never invaded the East Sea. They have always minded their own business with the water tribe. Why would the demon race suddenly attack the water tribe? Also, aren't the demon race not good in water and unable to enter the East Sea? These demon soldiers are moving and fighting at the bottom of the sea, but they are not affected at all. This is too strange. He vaguely felt that the demon race's attack on the water tribe this time was not simple. There must be something else going on. He released his divine soul magic sword and flew to the sea area 10 miles away. He used his divine soul power to investigate the bottom of the sea. As a result, there were more than 4,000 demon race warriors attacking the 10,000-strong water tribe army at the bottom of the sea within 10 miles. Although the demon race and the water tribe were fighting separately, the situation of the dozen or so troops was basically the same. The water tribe soldiers were not a match for the demon race warriors at all. They were beaten back and had no power to resist. Soon, only 6,000 or 7,000 of the water tribe soldiers were left. They were retreating back to the island in a panic. Ji Tianxing did not have time to think. He immediately controlled the divine soul magic sword and turned it into a 100-meter-long giant sword of white light, slashing at the demon race warriors. Divine soul magic sword. Slash. The giant sword of white light dove into the bottom of the sea and lit up with a dazzling white light, illuminating the seabed within a few thousand meters. Bang! With a dull sound, the giant sword of white light slashed at a demon race troop. More than 80 demon race warriors were killed on the spot. Dark purple demon blood mixed with pieces of flesh splattered on the bottom of the sea, creating huge waves that rushed to the surface of the sea. Slash! Ji Tianxing stood above the sea, 10 miles away. He used his divine soul to control the divine soul magic sword and slashed at another demon race troop. Boom! With another dull sound, more than 100 demon race warriors were killed on the spot. They turned into pieces of flesh and blood that rolled in the sea. Ji Tianxing controlled the divine soul magic sword and slashed at one demon race troop after another. In a short 100 breaths, he stood motionless on the sea surface, but the divine soul magic sword had killed more than 2,000 demon race warriors. The surviving demon race warriors knew that they had encountered an expert. They were scared out of their wits. They retreated in panic. Chapter 1036. These demon soldiers were only at the mystic understanding realm, and their leader was only at the origin core realm. To Ji Tianxing, these demons were as weak as ants. With his current strength, controlling the spirit sword was like chopping vegetables. He could kill dozens or even hundreds of them with a single strike. After he killed more than 4,000 demons, the surviving water race soldiers were all terrified and fled to the island with all their might. Splash! Splash! On the northern shore of the island, countless water race soldiers rushed out of the sea in panic and jumped onto the island. For a moment, the surface of the sea stirred up as hundreds of water race soldiers emerged. But when they reached the shore, they immediately stopped. This was because Ji Tianxing was standing in the air above the shore, looking at them expressionlessly. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and his aura was divine and majestic. A blazing white spirit sword floated behind him, and he gave off the aura of a transcendent. The water race soldiers looked at him in fear, not daring to act rashly. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Ji Tianxing saw an origin core realm sea demon in the crowd and asked in a dignified voice, "Are you the leader of the water race soldiers?" The sea demon was covered in wounds and was very weak. Being stared at by Ji Tianxing, it was afraid and retreated. But seeing that Ji Tianxing had no ill intentions, it hesitated for a moment before walking out of the crowd and standing on a rock. It learned the etiquette of the humankind, bowed to Ji Tianxing and said respectfully, "Senior, thank you so much for saving our lives just now. Because of you, so many of us brothers, we managed to escape. May I ask why Senior has stopped us?" Ji Tianxing said in a low voice, "I am Ji Tianxing, a friend of your Prince Tai. Where is Tai? Take me to him." His words were short and powerful, making the hundreds of water-kind warriors in awe. Meanwhile, they sighed in relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Unfortunately, they had always been stationed at the border and were not in the imperial court. They had never heard of Ji Tianxing defeating Tai. The water tribe commander came back to his senses and pointed to the sea 50 kilometers to the north, saying sternly, "Sir Ji Tianxing, His Highness the Prince is personally leading an army and fighting a bloody battle to resist the invasion of the demon race army. The demon race's army is coming in a menacing manner. There are many powerhouses in charge. You are His Highness' friend. Please go and help His Highness. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a solemn expression, I understand. Quickly return to the island to recuperate. With that, he stepped onto his soul magic sword and turned into a white streak of light, flying towards the northern border. After flying 100 miles away, he saw a dozen powerhouses fighting in the air above the sea in front of him. A dark golden dragon led a black dragon that was 1,000 meters long and 5 sea demons that were as large as mountains. They were fending off the fierce attacks of 8 demon powerhouses. The 8 demon powerhouses were led by 2 soul refinement realm powerhouses. The other 6 were around Sky Origin Realm level 8. The strongest was a giant blood-red demon that was as large as a mountain and looked like a bat. This giant demon had a pair of blood-red bone wings. Its arms, legs, and spine were covered in sharp black barbs. It had a pair of claws that were as sharp as knives. Its face was ferocious, and there were traces of dark red blood in its bloody mouth. Most importantly, this blood Azura's strength had reached the 4th level of the soul refining stage. Ji Tianqing recognized that this person's appearance and strength was very similar to Blood Shura, who was ranked 4th among the 6 demon marshals. It pounced on the black flood dragon in a frenzy, brandishing its sharp claws and unleashing countless blood-red blades, forcing the black flood dragon to retreat. The black dragon was Tai's guard, Long Yuan. Its strength was on par with Blood Shura. The two of them fought fiercely in the air. Their figures flashed back and forth, causing fierce winds and towering waves. The other soul refinement realm powerhouse was like a giant bear that was 100 meters tall. It had 4 black wings and 3 eyes. This black-winged giant demon was at soul refinement realm level 2. Its target was Golden Dragon Tai. It desperately used a demonic secret technique, releasing black demonic fog that covered the sky. It gathered phantoms of ghosts and giant demons to attack Tai with all its might. Tai stubbornly held on, resisting the black-winged giant demon's ferocious attacks. He used all his strength to contend with it. Surprisingly, Tai had broken through to Soul Refinement Realm and reached Soul Refinement Realm Level 1. Unfortunately, he hadn't condensed his Divine Soul Dharma Eye yet. His combat strength was still lacking. He used all his strength, but could only suppress the black-winged giant demon. He couldn't kill it. Other than these 4 Soul Refinement Realm powerhouses, the other 11 Sky Origin Realm sea beasts and giant demons were also fighting fiercely in the air above the sea, causing towering waves. The area within a radius of 100 miles was their battlefield. Violent shockwaves bombarded the sea, creating giant whirlpools on the surface of the sea. Ji Tianqing arrived at the battlefield. After seeing the situation clearly, he immediately controlled his Divine Soul Dharma Sword and rushed towards several giant demons of Sky Origin Realm Level 8 and Level 9. Divine Soul Dharma Sword Kill! He shouted and activated his Divine Soul power to control the Divine Soul Dharma Sword. It turned into a giant sword of white light that was 100 meters long and slashed toward a giant demon. The Sky Origin Realm Level 8 giant demon was covered in wounds, but it was furious and frenzied. It attacked a sea beast with all its might. When it sensed the Divine Soul Dharma Sword coming, it had no time to dodge and was hit by the sword. Boom! With a muffled sound, the giant demon that was as large as a mountain was cut into dozens of pieces by the Divine Soul Dharma Sword. It turned into pieces and blood that fell into the sea below. It was only a Sky Origin Realm cultivator, not a soul tempering stage cultivator. It died when its physical body was destroyed. Ji Tianqing killed a giant demon in one hit and then controlled the Divine Soul Dharma Sword to stab another giant demon not far away. When the giant devil heard the muffled sound and saw his comrade being killed in a single strike, his eyes were filled with shock. Seeing the giant sword of white light coming toward it, it was scared out of its wits. It turned around and ran toward the shore. However, the Divine Soul Dharma Sword was as fast as lightning. How could it dodge it? Boom! With a muffled sound, the giant demon followed its comrade's footsteps. Its head was smashed into pieces by the Divine Soul Dharma Sword. Blood splashed everywhere. The giant demon's body fell from the sky and crashed into the sea. Ji Tianqing had killed 2 Sky Origin Realm Level 8 giant demons within 2 breaths of time since he showed up. These 2 trolls were elite demon generals, valiant generals who commanded tens of thousands of demon warriors. However, under Ji Tianqing's Divine Soul Dharma Sword, they were as fragile as paper. The sudden change of events shocked everyone on the battlefield. Chapter 1037. Ji Tianxing? Why are you here? Golden Dragon Tai turned to look at Ji Tianxing, his eyes filled with shock. It's only been 2 months, and young Master Ji has broken through to the spirit refining realm? Long Yuan also stared at Ji Tianxing, his eyes filled with shock. Blood Shura's body surged with blood-red flames as he stared at Ji Tianxing with bloodshot eyes. He narrowed his eyes and murmured, Ji Tianxing? So he's Ji Tianxing? The human reptile who killed Marshal Zhua and Tu Ren. Who would have thought that Ben Shuai would meet him here? This is God's will. Today, Ben Shuai will tear him to pieces, extract his soul and bloodline, and offer them to His Majesty the Demon King. Blood Shura gritted his teeth, his voice cold and filled with hatred, filled with blood-red murderous intent. The other dozen sea beasts and demon cultivators gradually stopped fighting and stared at Ji Tianxing. Suddenly, the sea within 100 miles calmed down, and the deafening sounds that reverberated in the sky gradually disappeared. Ji Tianxing became the center of attention, enduring everyone's hateful and respectful gazes. Golden Dragon Tai temporarily abandoned the black-winged great demon and flew to Ji Tianxing's side in a flash of golden light. He asked, Young Master Ji, how did you find this place? Ji Tianxing shook his head and calmly said, I didn't come here on purpose. I was just passing by and happened to see the demon army invading. Tai, didn't the demon race coexist peacefully with the water tribe? Didn't they not invade the East Sea for thousands of years? Why did the demon race suddenly invade the East Sea and fight at the bottom of the sea? Tai frowned slightly and said in a low voice, Young Master Ji, now is not the time to talk about this. Let me take care of those demons first, then I'll explain it to you later. Ji Tianxing sized him up, then looked at the wounded Long Yuan. He pointed at Blood Shura and said, If I'm not wrong, that guy should be Demon Commander Blood Shura. Tai, with your and Long Yuan's strength, I'm afraid you can only fight it to a draw. You can't do anything to it, can you? Tai pursed his lips. His expression was resolute, and his eyes were filled with determination and unyielding will. But he didn't say anything, which meant that he agreed with Ji Tianxing's words. Ji Tianxing stared coldly at Blood Shura and said in a cold voice, I have an irreconcilable blood feud with the devil race. I once swore to kill all the devil race in the world. Since I've met you today, I definitely won't let you leave alive. Blood Shura, your time of death has come. As he spoke, he stepped onto his spirit magic sword and flew towards Blood Azura at the speed of light. Tai looked at Ji Yunshu's back with a complicated expression. He said in a low voice, Young Master Ji, be careful. Blood Shura's strength is extraordinary. Ji Tianxing didn't answer. In the blink of an eye, he was 1,000 meters away from Blood Shura. He stood still in the air. Blood Shura glared at Ji Yunshu with his blood-red eyes. He sneered and said, When Ben Shuai was in the northern desert, I heard that there was a little worm of the human race called Ji Tianxing. He was arrogant, and he always went against my race. Ben Shuai was blessed by the heavens. Ben Shuai met you here. Ha! Ji Tianxing, Ben Shuai will kill you. I'll grind your bones to dust and extract your soul. I'll let you have a taste of the agony of having your soul devoured by thousands of demons. Ji Tianxing didn't care about it. He looked calmly at the black serpent and said, Long Yuan, leave Blood Shura to me. You go help Tai deal with the other demons. Young Master Ji, this is too dangerous. Long Yuan hesitated. His eyes were filled with worry. Although he was worried about Tai's safety, he refused to back down and let Ji Tianxing's life be in danger. Ji Tianxing looked at him with determined eyes. Long Yuan, he said solemnly, I hope that when I kill Blood Shura, you and Tai can deal with the other demons. Don't disappoint me. His voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with unquestionable confidence and dominance. Long Yuan had a strange look in his eyes at once. He nodded in admiration and roared heroically, Good! Young Master Ji, let's have a competition. After that, he looked deeply at Ji Tianxing. Then he turned and flew toward Tai. He wanted to help Tai kill the black-winged great demon. Ji Tianxing's confident words enraged Blood Shura. He almost lost his mind. His whole body trembled. His eyes were filled with endless rage. Ji Tianxing, he roared in a low, hoarse voice. You're just a lowly insect that doesn't know what's good for you. This marshal will now let you know the consequences of being arrogant and conceited. Oh, Bun Shui will tear you apart. Blood Shura roared. He flapped his blood-red wings wildly, releasing thousands of blood-red blades. They shot toward Ji Tianqing like a rain of arrows. Each blood-red light blade was 100 meters long. Thousands of blood-red light blades shot toward Ji Tianqing at the same time, shrouding the sky within a radius of 10 miles and drowning Ji Tianqing. Suddenly, the sky turned into a blood-red purgatory. Half of the sky was dyed red. The air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. It was nauseating. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, was fearless. His expression was calm and collected as he stared at the bloody blade that was coming at him. Suddenly, his figure moved. Sword Soul Battle Tactics. He finally used his self-created Sword Soul Battle Tactics. His body turned into a golden flowing light and rushed toward the dense swarm of blood-red blades. To everyone's disbelief, he passed through the swarm of blood-red blades. His body flashed more than 20 times, evading countless attacks. Swoosh! In a breath's time, he passed through the swarm of blood-red blades unscathed and rushed to Blood Shura. The thousands of blood-red blades missed their target and crashed into the blue sea. Bang, 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 bang. Muffled sounds rang out one after another. The surface of the sea was cut into countless gullies, so deep that the bottom of the sea could be seen. Huge waves of thousands of feet high rose into the air. Violent energy swept through the world. Blood Shura was dumbfounded. He stared at Ji Tianqing, dumbfounded. His eyes were filled with horror. He could not believe that Ji Tianqing had used such a method to evade his ultimate killing move. At the same time, Ji Tianqing shouted with a cold face. Sky-burning palm. He abruptly raised his left arm and unleashed a gigantic flaming palm that blotted out the sky. Bang! Just as Blood Shura came to his senses, he was sent flying by the huge flaming palm. He was covered in red flames. He flew backward for more than 10 miles before he managed to stop himself. However, he had just stabilized himself. Before he could counterattack, another huge sword of white light came at him. Sword of Soul Technique cut. Following that was Ji Tianqing's thunderous roar. Blood Shura saw the huge sword of white light in front of him. He felt the sword essence and power that could split heaven and earth. He was instantly horrified. No. He let out a shrill and terrified roar. Bang! Chapter 1038. Amidst the deafening noise, the dazzling white light engulfed Blood Shura's figure. Its body, which was as large as a mountain and as dark red as blood, was immediately split in half by Ji Tianqing's soul magic sword. Swoosh! The broken corpses flew to both sides of the sky, sprinkling a dark red rain of blood that covered the sky and covered the sun. Everyone watched in horror as the two halves of Blood Shura's body fell from the sky into the sea. Splash! A muffled boom burst out, and a huge wave that was hundreds of feet high was stirred up on the ocean surface. From the bloody body, a ball of dazzling spiritual light flew out with a whoosh and headed for the land in the north. It was Blood Shura's spiritual soul. He was terrified and had lost all will to fight. All he wanted was to escape the East Sea and return to the land of the northern desert. The harsh words it had said earlier were now completely forgotten. Although it was humiliating, he couldn't care less about anything else. His life was more important. However, Ji Tianqing was determined to kill him. How could he let him escape alive? Kill! Ji Tianqing roared again, his voice reverberating in the air above the sea. The spiritual sword turned into a dazzling white light. It crossed 5 miles in an instant and hit Blood Shura's spiritual soul. Bang! Blood Shura didn't have the chance or strength to dodge. The ball of spiritual light exploded into a dozen pieces and splashed in all directions. A soul refinement realm powerhouse of his generation, the dignified demon commander Blood Azura, was killed by Ji Tianqing just like that. From the beginning of the battle until now, Ji Tianqing had only used 3 moves. 3 breaths of time. No one could have imagined that his battle prowess was actually formidable to such an extent. It was simply shocking. Blood Shura, a LV4 soul refining realm martial artist, was killed by him in 3 moves. Just how powerful was his true battle prowess? Tai, Long Yuan, the black-winged great demon, the sea beasts, and the demon clan experts were all stunned. The muffled rumbling sound was still echoing in the sky. The sea was still surging with huge waves, and the smell of blood in the air had yet to dissipate. However, the dozen or so experts present were completely silent. They were completely silent and couldn't even utter a single word. A moment later, Tai and Long Yuan came back to their senses and cheered excitedly. Oh my god! Young Master Ji had killed Blood Azura in 3 moves. In the short span of 2 months, not only has he broken through to the soul refinement realm, his combat prowess has actually reached such a terrifying level. It's too inconceivable. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, who would dare to believe it? This was simply a legend. Could it be that young Master Ji is so confident that he wants to compete with us to see who can finish off their opponents faster? Who would have thought that young Master Ji would be able to kill Blood Shura before His Highness, and I could even kill a single demon? How could they compete? They didn't even give us a chance. Tai and Long Yuan were not the only ones who were excited. The other 5 water race experts were shocked and excited as well. They looked at Ji Tianqing in awe. The 5 Demon Clan experts who were lucky enough to survive finally came back to their senses. They didn't dare to attack anymore. They didn't even care about the demon army at the bottom of the sea. They turned and ran for their lives. They could throw away their dignity and face. They couldn't care less about the Demon King's orders and the great plan to attack the Eastern Sea. At this moment, the only thing they needed to do was to stay alive. They only wanted to escape the Eastern Sea and get away from Ji Tianqing. They wanted to escape back to the northern desert continent. However, Tai, Long Yuan, and the others came back to their senses. They immediately used their ultimate killer moves and began to pursue. Long Yuan personally went after the black-winged great demon of the 2nd-level soul refinement realm. Tai and the other sea beasts went after the other 4 demon generals. The 2 sides began to chase and kill in the air above the sea. Ji Tianqing also took action personally. He controlled the astral projection sword to chase after the demons. In just a short span of 20 breaths, 4 of the 5 demons had been killed before they could escape the Eastern Sea. The last black-winged great demon was severely injured by Long Yuan, but it relied on its soul refinement realm strength to escape using the Demon Dao's secret technique. The black-winged great demon was about to escape the Eastern Sea and return to the land. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing finally arrived. He controlled the astral projection sword to hit it from 10 miles away. Boom! With a loud noise, the black-winged great demon's body was cut into pieces. Mixed with black blood, they fell from the sky into the sea. Its astral projection light dived into the sea, trying to escape from the bottom of the sea to the shore. But it couldn't hide from Ji Tianqing at all. An even more violent power erupted from the divine soul magic sword as it slashed into the sea, cleaving through the waves and slamming into the ball of divine soul light. Crack! With a crisp cracking sound, the astral projection light of the black-winged great demon was also shattered. It turned into a dozen pieces of light and fell to the bottom of the sea. The overlords and leaders of the demon army were all killed. The more than 20,000 demon warriors who were attacking at the bottom of the sea had also lost their commander and spiritual support. They had completely lost their fighting spirit and fighting spirit. Like a tray of loose sand, they quickly ran away. Tai, Long Yuan, and the others led the army of the Sea Tribe to launch a counterattack. They pursued the demon warriors at the bottom of the sea for 200 miles, all the way to the shore. In the end, more than 80% of the 20,000 demon warriors were killed. Only 3,000 or 4,000 of them escaped the Eastern Sea and returned to the land of the northern desert. The battle was over. Long Yuan and the sea beast generals were busy cleaning up the battlefield and cleaning up the aftermath. They were busy at the bottom of the sea. Tai took Ji Tianqing and returned to the island 300 miles away from the shore. The 2 landed at the center of the island, outside a large tent. This tent belonged to the commander-in-chief, Tai. It was also the most heavily guarded. When the 2 landed, the hundreds of guards outside the tent all knelt down and saluted. Tai waved his hand, indicating for the guards to leave. Then, he led Ji Tianqing into the tent. The 2 entered the study to talk. After the 2 sat down, they each picked up a cup of spirit tea and chatted as they sipped. Tai looked at Ji Tianqing with shining eyes. His expression was somewhat excited as he asked in an envious tone, "Young Master Ji, it's only been 2 months since we last met. Not only have you broken through to the spirit-refining realm, but your battle prowess has also soared to such a level. This is simply shocking. If this lord's guess is correct, You must have encountered some sort of fortuitous encounter in the Eastern Sea's returning ruins, correct? Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. That's right. Although the Eastern Sea's returning ruins is dangerous, it also contains great opportunities. Let's not talk about this for now. Hurry and tell me, just what happened. Why have the demons become so strange? Not only have they attacked the Eastern Sea, but they can also dive to the bottom of the sea to fight. This is simply too shocking. Tai's expression turned grave at the mention of this question. After a moment of silence he said in a solemn tone, Young Master Ji, to tell you the truth, the demons have indeed undergone a great change. For thousands of years, an invisible chain has been on their bodies, shackling them. Chapter 1039. The shackles of the demon race have been removed? Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows, and his expression became grave and gloomy. He was well aware that the shackles of the demon race referred to the bloodline curse. In the ancient legends, the goddess of jade light had sacrificed her life and divine spark to plant an eternal and indestructible curse on the demon race. As the demon race grew stronger, their bodies would undergo drastic changes. They would gradually become ugly and savage, as large as mountains. Every night of the full moon, when the 7 stars competed for glory, they would uncontrollably reveal their true forms and suffer great pain and torment. Their mutated bodies would limit their talent and growth, bringing them all sorts of inconveniences. Precisely because of this, the demon race was not good at swimming. Ordinary demons could not enter the Eastern Sea. For several thousand years, the demon race had shown no interest in the Eastern Sea and had never launched a large-scale invasion. But now, Unity Supreme was telling him that the shackles of the demon race had been removed. This was a bolt from the blue. Ji Tianxing stared at Unity Supreme, his voice solemn and low as he asked, Unity Supreme, is this true? The shackles of the demon race supposedly originated from the ancient era, a curse of the gods. Ever since the ancient era ended, there have been no more gods in this world. How could the demon race have suddenly removed the power of the curse? Unity Supreme was a prince of the imperial court of the water race. Since childhood, he had read many books and seen many things. Of course, he knew about the ancient legends and the curse. He nodded gravely. This lord knows that this news is very shocking and inconceivable. In truth, this lord also did not dare to believe that this was true. But this lord had to observe and research for more than a month to confirm this point. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly, agreeing with his point of view. He motioned for him to continue. Unity Supreme sighed and said worriedly, The demon race armies attacking the Eastern Sea have all mutated and their shackles have been removed. In the past, profound understanding realm demons like them could not dive into the sea at all. Once they entered the sea, they would find it difficult to move. Those origin core realm demon commanders could only dive into the sea for short periods of time. They could not fight at the bottom of the sea. However, you have also seen the current situation. The devil race army is completely unafraid of the deep sea. They can dive into the sea as if they are walking on flat ground and use their martial arts moves normally. Through my observations, I also discovered that after the shackles of the devil race were removed, not only did they become stronger, but their growth rate also doubled. For thousands of years, the demon race has been restricted by the curse of the gods, so they can't invade the Eastern Sea. That's why they have never fought with the water race. Now that they've lost their shackles, they've decided to attack us. After all, the northern desert was too cold and barren. The Eastern Sea and the northern desert bordered each other, and the seabed contained an abundance of cultivation resources, which was what the demon race desired the most. Since the war broke out, in the past few months, the demon army has been divided into several armies to invade the East Sea, massacring aquatic creatures and plundering mineral resources. Tai was still recounting what had happened in the past few months. He was extremely worried about this, and he also hated the demons. Ji Tianxing gradually became absent-minded. Many thoughts appeared in his mind, and a bold conjecture emerged. For thousands of years, the demons have been unable to dispel the power of the curse. They have been shackled and shackled. As a result, the demons' growth has been restricted. They have been unable to grow to their peak, much less defeat the other races and unify the entire continent. But now, the devil race's curse has been removed. They will become the most powerful race on this continent. They will definitely go on a crusade, massacring and plundering resources. They will rise rapidly in a very short period of time. Just what was the reason that allowed them to dispel the bloodline curse? Could this have something to do with Yao Yao? Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with worry and anxiety. He wanted nothing more than to rush to the northern desert immediately and rescue Yun Yao. Tai saw that his expression was strange and asked with concern, "Young Master Ji, what's wrong?" "Oh, it's nothing." Ji Tianqing came back to his senses and waved his hand. He said calmly, "When I first entered the monarch residence, Divine Master Blackfeather gathered all the princes to discuss a plan to deal with the Demon King. I remember that the princes of both the human and Yao races agreed to attack the Devil race and take the opportunity to kill the Demon King and eliminate all future troubles. Only the Water race did not agree and watched coldly from the sidelines." Hearing Ji Tianqing bring up the past, Tai felt a little awkward. He lowered his head slightly and avoided Ji Tianqing's gaze. He didn't dare to look Ji Tianqing in the eye. After a moment of silence he nodded and said, "That's right. I did say those words back then, which disappointed the princes of both the human and Yao races. But the Water race and the Devil race have always minded our own business. Our ancestors also warned our descendants not to provoke the Devil race to avoid bringing destruction to the Water race. But who would have thought that the Devil race would suddenly remove their shackles and become enemies with all the races in the world? The Water race of the Eastern Sea would be the first to bear the brunt." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said in a serious tone, "The Devil race has already invaded the Eastern Sea on a large scale. I believe that the imperial court of the Water race will no longer follow any ancestral teachings and will not tolerate it any longer. Work hard, lead your people and warriors of the Water clan to resist the invasion of the demon army, and defend your East Sea. The Devil race has no allies and will become enemies with all the races in the world. In the end, they will be destroyed by all the races. However, the matter of the races working together to destroy the Devil race still needs to be discussed with the imperial court of the various races. I'm afraid it will be a long time before it can be carried out. Before that, the Water race of the Eastern Sea must hold on. Do not fall under the iron hooves of the Devil race." After that, Ji Tianqing patted Tai's shoulder and got up to leave. Tai hurriedly stood up and asked, "Young Master Ji, where are you going?" "You already know the answer." Ji Tianqing stopped but did not turn around. Tai frowned and said in a serious tone, "Are you really going to enter the northern desert and rescue Yun Yao from the Devil race's nest?" Ji Tianqing said seriously, "Of course it's true. When have I ever lied?" Tai sighed and said, "Although you have broken through to the spirit refinement realm and are very powerful, the northern desert is a harsh environment. The Devil race is cruel and cunning. You must be careful. This lord sincerely hopes that you can come back alive. The next time I return to the imperial court, I will be able to see you again. Don't worry, this lord will not lose to you. I will definitely sharpen myself in this war and quickly increase my strength." Only then did Ji Tianqing turn around and look at him with a smile on his face. With a solemn tone he said, "Very good. I will give you a chance to challenge me, but only once. When you feel that you're strong enough, feel free to challenge me. I am leaving, take care of yourself." After saying this, he turned and walked out of the study, leaving the main tent. Tai stood by the window and watched him fly into the sky. He left the island on his sword and flew towards the northern coast. Only when Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared over the horizon did he withdraw his gaze and sigh. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.